well, the camera, everything?
Yeah, looks good.
Great.
Cool. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today for this very interesting topic of should we drop the word vegan? We have two different perspectives on this topic, and we're going to be hearing from both sides, and they're going to be having conversation about this. So just before we begin, I just wanted to remind everyone to please keep yourself muted unless otherwise told to you by myself. I'll be your little MC for the time being. And that's just so that we make sure that we can hear everyone and that there isn't any unnecessary background noise. Hopefully there isn't any coming from myself because there is someone mowing the lawn next door.
Nice.
But yeah, so you made it in. There's only about 100 seats here for this call, unfortunately, but you're here and it is recorded, so it'll be available later. And we will have a time for questions at the end. And there's plenty of time for both people to speak. So I'm not going to be timing you, just please be mindful of your time. There'll be plenty of time for both of you to speak. And just introduce you, I'll introduce myself first really quickly. I'm Cheyenne, for anybody who doesn't know me. I'm an activist in the animal rights and environmental movements, and I will be your MC for the talk today. And we have David with Skinny Vegan Fitness, who is an animal rights videographer, photographer, content creator, and public speaker. And we have Orlando, who will be speaking about post-veganism at Orlando for Freedom on Instagram, who is an animal rights organizer, strategist, and web developer with Direct Action Everywhere. And I'll leave it to you to give a quick 30-second introduction about yourself, if David wants to start that.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, my name's David. I'm from England, from the UK. I was born a vegetarian and I became a vegan about 10 years ago. Fast forward to right now, I work with animal safe movement. So as Shane mentioned, I'm working mainly in slaughterhouses and farms, documenting what's happening there, basically getting very close and taking a lot of videos. I'm currently in India, so what we're seeing over here is quite like it's about as graphic as you can get, basically every single vigil. So that's been my life for the past like 12 months, just to give you a little quick background. Before that, I was an organizer with AV. I've been an organizer with DxE as well. I'm currently only an active organizer for Animal Safe Movement. So that's in 30 seconds, I guess.
Thank you. And Orlando?
Yeah, so for me, I started this path towards animal liberation in global poverty in grad school in international affairs. I started thinking about how to reduce suffering in the world, got into animal rights and DxE specifically in 2015. I started my own chapter of DxE in Florida. Then I moved here to the San Francisco Bay Area, where the largest chapter of DxE is. And I've been involved with projects like banning the sale of fur in Berkeley, which then led to San Francisco and now California. I helped launch the Berkeley Animal Rights Center, and I helped launch, and I'm still working on Rose's Law, which is a project to get a Bill of Rights for animals. And then I got involved in this whole idea of moving beyond veganism about a year ago, and I've been focusing on that and on Rose's Law the most lately.
Awesome, thank you. And just another reminder for you and for David that I won't be interrupting you, so please be mindful of your own time and each other's time when you're making your arguments or when you're speaking on this topic. So I guess we can go ahead and begin. We'll start with Orlando, and you can go ahead and start whenever you're ready.
Okay, so thank you so much, David, for being here and being able to have this conversation. I'm really excited. So I've been thinking a lot about my arguments, and I basically try to boil them down in a way that I hope that we can agree on most parts and then just like work out the kinks the way that I'm seeing it. So basically I have two main arguments that I'm making, two claims against veganism, right? So my first claim is I want to look at it through the framework of what's called movement ecology. And movement ecology is a way of looking at the whole movement and seeing how different parts of the movement, different organizations, have different theories of change and how they all fit together to form part of this whole movement, right? So in movement ecology, the three main types of theories of change. The first one is systemic change, and these are organizations that are trying to change institutions, change governments. Then there's personal transformation theories of change, which are trying to change individuals. And then there's alternatives, which are not trying to change individuals. They're not trying to change existing institutions, but they're trying to create new ways of living in the world. And so this can be things like vegan eco-villages or alternative meat companies. But I'm not going to talk about alternatives today in order to present my argument. I just want to focus on the other two. Systemic change, by which I mean things like running for office, trying to change laws, creating a mass movement, unions. All of these are trying to put pressure on the current system. And then personal transformation, which are things like mentoring, which are things like yoga, meditation, 12-step programs, food shares, which are trying to transform individuals so then individuals can transform the world around them, right? So I have these two theories of change. And my first claim about veganism is that in the grassroots animal rights movement, we've been spending very little effort on systemic changes and a lot of effort on personal transformation. So that's my first claim, is that we should be spending less effort on this personal transformation, one-on-one vegan conversion, and we should move some of that effort towards systemic changes instead, that we're having a disproportionate amount of effort put over here in the personal transformation. That's my first claim. My second claim is that whether we want to change systems or whether we want to change individuals, it's more effective to use a framing that's focused on justice and on animals, as opposed to a framing that's focused on humans and consumption, right? Because I feel that you can win more people over, that it's clearer, and that's my second argument, right? So we need both. We need personal transformation. We need systemic change. But my first argument is that we should put more on systemic change than we currently are. My second argument is that regardless of what we're doing, the framing should be animal-centered and justice-centered, as opposed to human-centered and consumer-centered. So those are my main two arguments to structure this whole talk, and we can go into them later, but I just wanted to put them out there as the way I'm seeing things, and just put it as a framework of how I'm thinking about this.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So I think your the first argument, I don't think many people would necessarily disagree. I think that it's clear that we do put a lot more effort into the personal change as opposed to the systemic change. I think the easy way to explain why is because of how easy it is and how accessible it is to be a part of personal change. Like, you've got all these organizations that are focusing on that, and it's the easiest form of activism. So for brand new activists and brand new vegans, which are the majority, like, I mean, if we took a percentage of how many vegans have been active for, or whatever, how many activists have been active for, you know, let's say 5 years or more, it's going to be the minority compared to how many have been active for maybe 6 months to 1 year. They're going to be the majority. So I feel like the personal approach is more attractive to new activists for sure, and that's not a surprise. It's easier, you know, it's an easier thing to do. But for sure, I agree that there could be and probably should be more efforts for systemic change as well, so that it's a bit more even, because both are necessary for sure. But you're right, it is very much weighted towards personal change, that's for sure. So I think we agree there. And on the second point, yeah, it's an interesting one. I'm just I wrote down what you said because I want to make sure I understand everything properly. I mean, framing on justice and the animals. Somebody needs to mute, I think. Ollie?
I've got it. No worries.
Okay, cool. Yeah, framing on justice on the animals rather than humans and consumption. I think that I don't see that as a dichotomy. I see that actually as it's completely possible to do both at the same time. And I think that I find that really important because I had this discussion recently with a friend where he said that veganism for him, it focuses too much on people. And I said, well, it should focus on people because people are the problem. And you know, some of the focus should absolutely be on people. Like, for example, if we just compare ourselves for a second to women's rights or the feminist movement, I mean, the majority of their focus is on the patriarchy and on people that are pushing patriarchal, you know, systems, and on people that are acting so let's say sexist ways, or people that are promoting a sexist system. They are aiming for those people. So the focus for them is on that, not necessarily on the women, if you know what I mean. So I think that sometimes that the focus, it's okay for the focus to be on people because people are the problem. But absolutely, focusing on people as well as the animals in the same message, I feel like having both in there is important. That's what I aim to do with my messaging. It's usually it starts off with something like you said, like justice for these animals, and then it finishes off with a message that's a call to action for you to change yourself. So you might make it about both. That's kind of, so we're on the same page for sure. I just don't see the second part as a one or the other. I see it can be definitely combined, and that's the most powerful message in my eyes for sure.
Okay, I can see that. So I'm not sure how should we proceed. Should we? I think there's still a little bit of things to tease out in the first argument or in the second one. Should we just like jump into either one of them, or?
Yeah, man. I mean, this is probably, yeah, I guess so. Yeah. So if we can just probably have it like, I don't know, just have it natural, just see where we go, I suppose. And then if we see that we're not moving or we're stuck on a point, we can just jump to another point. I mean, we could just see how things go. Okay,
that sounds great. Okay, so I'm gonna jump into the first claim that systemic, and I'm glad that we agree mostly that we could be spending a little bit more effort on the systemic one than on the personal transformation one. So I guess for me, it's like I get what you say, that it seems like it's easier to just be like, okay, I'm gonna go out there and I'm gonna do outreach and I'm gonna convince people, and like boom, you know, like you're having success, you feel good, you need that you're creating change. So I feel like that seems easier, but I think, and of course I'm saying that we need both, but I think that we originally thought that personal transformation was really, really helpful. And I think over time, I'm beginning to think that it's actually less helpful than we originally thought that it was. And the reasons that I think that is, first of all, is because I think personal transformation, this one-on-one changes, it's not happening fast enough. So like the scientists say, we have very few years to stabilize the climate. And when we try to change people one by one on the streets, the majority of them, of course, don't go vegan. And then the ones that do, the studies show that maybe like the majority of them, maybe like 80% in one study, go back to eating animals. And then the 20% of them who do stay vegan, only a tiny percentage of those actually become activists. So the way I see it, it's like, you know, you could finally convince 100,000 people to go vegan, and then 80,000 of them go back to eating animals, and then walk around saying, you know, I tried to be vegan, it doesn't work, it's too hard. And then the other 20,000 are walking around saying, oh, I'm a good person, I'm ethical because I'm vegan, and they feel that they don't have to do anything else. So I don't think it's fast enough. And then even if it were a little faster, I think there are systemic blocks in place that prevent this theory of change to achieve like the goal of animal liberation. And I think the biggest block is the government, right? So all these vegans boycotting these industries for years, And then President Trump comes around and he signs with one signature, he gives them $28 billion in a year, the industry, right? So all these people for all this time trying to do financial damage to the industry, and it's very little compared to like the bailouts that the industries get from the government. So the way I see it is like these systemic blocks need to be addressed, and it's gonna take some time, and it's gonna take new skills. But I feel like this is not just the animal rights movement that has this issue. It's just like in general is this neoliberal ideology that we adopted from like Reagan and Thatcher that say just buy your way to liberation. Like that's how you can achieve change, by supply and demand. If you want to change the world, you just have to buy things, you know, and change yourself, take shorter showers, buy, you know, fluorescent light bulbs, don't drive as much. And I think these individualistic changes prevent us from organizing in a systemic way. And I think in the environmental movement, they started to realize this, and they're no longer being like, stop driving. They're like, okay, we're going to pass emission standards. Like everyone has to do this, right? As opposed to trying to convince people one by one. So in summary, I feel that we need to politicize the movement. And I get you that it's not as easy because we're not used to it. So but I think like we need to start practicing what it feels like to get to know your city council people, to try to see what laws we can pass. Because right now, if we do outreach, we have nowhere to send people to, because we're not practicing these skills of developing these connections within the political system. But I think we can do things that like banning fur, like banning castration, divesting from animal exploitation. And once we have grassroots people trying to make this systemic changes, we'll be able to ask for a lot more. But since right now, most of the grassroots activists are only asking for individual change, the systemic change organizations, unfortunately, can't ask for that much. So they end up asking for these welfarist laws that are just uninspiring, like bigger cages. But I'm saying if we have the activists, the grassroots activists, focusing on systemic change, we can ask for bigger and bolder things. So in summary, I think we need to politicize the movement. And I think the vegan word and the idea of veganizing people takes way too much energy, because people feel, wow, the animals are winning. I just veganized 3 people. And I'm like, well, if you had used that afternoon and gone to city council to give public comment, maybe we're not going to veganize city council, but you can tell them, hey, I'm passing this castration ban, let's do it. And you only have to convince them, as opposed to trying to convince all these individuals who are gonna all of a sudden think that they're ethical just because they're vegan.
Yeah. So I think to like unpack a few things that like, I still definitely agree. Like, and it's for anyone that doesn't agree with the fact that systemic changes need to happen, and like the systemic blocks you were talking about, if somebody doesn't agree with that, then they're just not looking properly. Like there's no doubt that these things exist. But just a few points like I want to come back to. There was a point about the study on vegans going back. I think we need to be really careful, because that's sensationalist media. You know, these studies were very small study groups. And I've only seen maybe 2 articles on this, and they make it a big deal. They make it seem like it was millions of people and 80% of them went back, when in reality it was like something like 600, I think, something like that, people. And then we have to also consider in these studies, how many of them are actually vegan, you know, because people say I'm vegan a lot, and you know, we both know from, I'm sure from experience, that it's not always true. You know, I've met vegans who in the same conversation told me about a meal they were eating that had, you know, animal products in it. And then we have to have a discussion about how they've misunderstood what it means. And so, you know, I just think we need to be careful with studies like that, and especially sensationalist media, like to avoid it, because it's really, really gets us, it can really confuse us. It not being fast enough, I mean, yeah, absolutely. Of course it's not fast enough. Nothing we do is fast enough. You know, the only thing that's fast enough is the thing that works right now. You know, so I'm with you on that. It's definitely not fast enough. And if we had more effort on the systemic side, absolutely, I think we would see some progress. But I think that the negative you pointed out with the bailouts, I think I personally see that bailout as a good thing. in a weird way, because that is a lot of money that comes from the government budget. And that's going to have a lot of people within government talking about, hey, like, this is not sustainable. We can't keep throwing $23 billion a year at the industry. So I think that's panic mode. I think that's actually a win. I obviously not a win that they've done it, but a win that all of that money was necessary to bail them out because people don't want it anymore. So as much as, of course, it's horrible that it continues for another year, but in the sense of like, well, what you're talking about, systemic change, the fact that that was even necessary is a massive dent. That is like a huge dent in that industry, that they need that bailout, and it can't be sustained. But my last thing I wanted to mention, you talked about how we get more activists over to the systemic side, and that I am all on board for. But what I am concerned about, and this is where I think we might have maybe have a disagreement here, but if we have, okay, you're talking about we want to avoid welfareist laws. We don't want to have systemic changes that are just welfareist, because then we're suggesting there's a good way to do this to animals, and there isn't a good way to do it to them. But we need more people to be on board with the systemic activism to get bigger changes. But then there's a problem. If the public has not been primed for that, if the public is not already on board with that, then when we try to ask for these massive systemic changes, they're going to be rejected because the public isn't on board, and ultimately the public is the ones that are deciding on these things. So if we don't spend effort working with the public to maybe they don't go vegan, fine, but if we don't spend at least a bit of time trying to get them to go vegan, trying to get them to understand this, when it comes time to vote, it's not going to go through, because they all want the meat, they all want the eggs, they all want the dairy, they all want the fur. And that's not going to change just because we start asking the government to ban it, you know? And as an example, India is a perfect example. It's where I am right now. They banned beef in most of the states here. And because the public was not on board, beef just became a black market item. So now, not only are they still killing animals and eating beef, they're doing it out of the government sight. So can you imagine how much worse that is for the animals? And you know, obviously it was never better, but now it's about as bad as it could ever be, because it's underground with no rules, no laws, and nothing. So that's my biggest fear with only focusing on systemic changes, that if we ignore the people, this is what will happen. You can ban meat, but it will continue in places where we can't get to anymore. So yeah, that's what I would say about that. I don't know, man. What do you think about that? We agree mostly, but there are a few of my concerns. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think I totally agree with that we need to get the public on board, and that we shouldn't abandon personal transformation. I think we definitely still need that. We still definitely need to educate the public. What I think is that a lot of the public is already on board, and this is my second argument, depending on how you frame it. Right? Like if you ask people, like, do you think we should ban castration without painkillers? I think most people are gonna be like, hell yeah, that's horrible. I didn't even know that happened. Right? So that's why I think like using that language that like really centers what's happening to the animals can be really helpful, and people are already on board with a lot of these things. But that'll be more like framing. That's more like the second argument. But to go back to the bailout thing, which I also think is it's good. It's a good sign that the government, the industry is so desperate that they need to be bailed out. It's definitely a good sign. What I think is that the more that the industry feels in trouble, the more that they're going to push the government to get more and more bailouts. And the government is just so corrupt that they'll find new places to sell the excess dairy and cheese. They'll sell it to schools, to prisons, to the military. You know, they'll find ways to do it. And of course, at some point, if it just gets so egregious that only 10% of people are consuming these products and the industry is being totally supported by the government, of course, at that point, people are going to be like, what the hell is this? This is absurd. Why are we giving all this money to these industries that no one wants? So what I think is like at that point, people will be like, okay, let's protest, let's disrupt, let's change the system. This is unfair. So what I'm saying is like we can start doing that now. We don't have to wait years of the subsidies becoming stronger and being there, we can start challenging the subsidies and the systemic issues right now. But of course, we also do need the personal transformation. I think we're on the same page as that. My only argument is that it's out of proportion, and that we should reduce a little bit our personal transformation and redirect those energies and start practicing what systemic change can look like.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't see anything that to disagree with. I think that, I mean, obviously mostly the movement of personal change, I think, is mostly responsible for getting the dairy industry to where it is, you know, with people consuming less and less dairy and consuming more and more alternatives. So, you know, it's definitely, I think that this is an example of where the two can work together really well, because they quite, you know, clearly the people are changing. They don't want to breastfeed anymore, and then they are, you know, that now we've caused this problem for the government, and then now the systemic change activists can go in and finish it off, basically. I think this is a perfect example of how it can work, I think.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page. I think, like, the only small point where we disagree is that I think, like, this idea of, like, veganizing people seems like an easy thing for people to feel good doing. And they're like, oh, I don't want to do that complicated political stuff. Like, I'm not political. I don't want to get into that. Politicians are corrupt. I'm just going to veganize my uncle. And, like, that's how I change the world, right? So I feel like that to me is, like, the biggest problem with, like, this veganizing mentality, is that it makes people feel satisfied. I'm doing my part. I'm living by my values. I'm ethical. I don't need to do anything else. So that's like my biggest issue with that. But I don't know if we agree on that or disagree, or why.
Yeah, I think what I find happens quite a lot within our movement, especially when I'm talking to other activists that have been doing this for a long time, is that I'm not saying you're doing this, or maybe you are, you can tell me. I feel like we lose track and we lose the sense of what it feels like to be a new activist or a new vegan. And we end up looking at the world in these very experienced eyes. And I feel like a lot of your points and a lot of your argument comes exactly from that place, because you've obviously what you're doing with DxE, it's a lot of people don't have the same tools, same resources, the same experience, same trainings that you have with DxE where you are. So of course you see things from a different perspective. And I think that the younger people, let's say, younger not in age, but younger in terms of experience within the activism, within the vegan or animal rights movement, this idea of changing people one-on-one it's more attractive. Not necessarily, I said easier, but not necessarily because it's easier, but because it does make them feel good, and it does make them feel like they're doing something because they are doing something. This is their first ever step into what it feels like to make any kind of change in the world. And I think it is a great step. And I think as people progress with this, they usually reach the natural point where they don't want to do outreach anymore. Like, I've met so many people that they've done outreach for a few years, and then they say, right, I'm done with this. You know, I want to make more impact, because they reach that level where they say, this is not fast enough for me, just like you're saying. I think there's an argument to maybe try and catch people in their early days and say, hey, look, you should start learning about systemic change at the same time as outreaching, so that you can do both. I think there's definitely an argument for that. But I wouldn't say that people who are changing, individuals, I wouldn't say that's useless. I'd say that's a very important part of their growth as an activist. I think they need to go through that to then go on and advance, or I wouldn't even say it's advancing, but just to get new tools, you know, and learn new things. I think the starting point for most people is talking to their family and friends, getting a taste of what it feels like to change something, and then getting hungry for more, because that's what happens, isn't it? You make a bit of change and you're like, hey, I like that, I can do more, and then you do more, and then you get bigger and bigger and bigger, and the next thing you're disrupting a McDonald's. You know, this is kind of how I see it, how it tends to go for people, you know?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I'm really glad you brought that up, because I feel like this is one of the points where we can start thinking how we can join these two growing separate parts of the movement, right? People who want to focus on systemic change and don't want to call themselves vegans, and new people who want to work on personal transformation and do want to focus on veganizing. So I think that's a great point. Sure. And I totally agree that for people who perhaps live in a rural area and they know nobody else that's vegan, it's going to be really hard for them to create any sort of systemic change. I know so many people that say, I've never met a vegan in my life, I'm the only vegan in my high school, and I do see how it's like a low barrier to entry. They can be like, okay, I'm living my values, I don't have the ability to create any political change, but I can go and hold a TV, and I can try to get people one by one, and I can do that with just me and a friend, right? So yeah, I think that's a great point, that it's like a really great way for activists, for people who haven't been activists, to just dip their toes, even if they don't have a community, even if they don't have the political knowledge. I think that's a great point. So that's one thing that we can think about, is like, how can we allow people this entry level, just veganize your uncle kind of activism, but also not let them think like, just keep doing this forever times a million, and eventually you're veganized a million people. But like, can you start trying to redirect that energy? But not for everyone, of course. Like you said, it's not for everyone. Some people really enjoy this one-on-one work, and they should keep doing that. Yeah. I just think as a whole, there's a little bit of a disproportion, and there's a little bit too many people that have become enchanted with this one-on-one, and some of them should be moving towards the more difficult, okay, how do I get laws passed through city council? I have no idea, I've never done that before. So but I think we're pretty much in agreement. So I'm glad that we got at least the first point that the two parts can agree with. It's like, okay, how do we have this low barrier to entry for new vegans to do this, but also not let them get stuck there and think that that's all there is.
Yeah, I think Cheyenne wants to go ahead.
Yeah, we have quite a few people in the comments asking if you can talk specifically on dropping the word vegan, as everyone's really excited to hear about that. So I just thought I would put that little message through to you guys.
I think this was like a precursor to that conversation, because this is I think this is the core reasoning behind Orlando's, but from what I've seen, right? I think from what I've watched your presentation and video, and I think I know why that's why we're talking about this. So sorry if everyone's getting impatient, but you know, this is important. We need to do this. We need to do the background, you know, build the building blocks to lead up to that point.
Laying the foundations. That's great. Thank you for letting them know.
Yeah, exactly. Because veganism, and the word veganism, it's not just like, okay, let's just drop the word and replace it for plant-based, right? Like that's not the point of this conversation. The point of the conversation is veganism comes with a full theory of change in itself, right? And that's what I'm arguing, and that's why we need to set the foundation. Like, is this theory of change as useful as we think it is? Should we put as much resources as we are? And then the second one is like, okay, if we agree that we want to do a little bit more systemic change, now I think maybe we can move to the second question, which is, do you do that with like I'm saying, human-centered framing, or do we do that with an animal-centered framing, a consumer-centered framing, or a justice-centered framing? And can we do both at the same time, like you suggested? So if you want, I can go into my second argument now. I can explain how I'm thinking about it, and then we can get into it. So my second claim is that the justice frame, the animal-centered justice frame, is better than the consumer-centered human frame, right? So the reason that I think that it's better, and that we have to choose one or the other, is that, and when I talk about frames, I mean the mental structures through which we see the world. You can think of the metaphor as like wearing glasses. You're wearing glasses, and the way you're examining a problem, like that's the frame through which you're looking at this problem. And the thing that I argue is that veganism is a consumer frame. And by that I mean that when we talk about veganism, people immediately are looking through that consumer frame glasses. And the thing about frames is that you give more and more information to people, but if they're looking through the same glasses, it's not going to change. It's not going to change the way they look at things because it's more information through the same glasses. What you need to do is you need to change and put on another set of glasses that is the justice-centered glasses. And everyone knows this, of course, doing outreach. It's a frame battle. People are saying, oh, it's my personal choice to eat animals, but they taste good, but I need it for health. It's the consumer frame. And I'm saying the justice frame is like, no, animals are victims. They have rights. They deserve freedom. So we do this through outreach. This is like how the conversations normally go. But when you ask people, as an aside, the last study was from Faunalytics. This study is from the Sentience Institute. 97% of people, when you ask them, do you think eating animals or being vegetarian is a personal choice? 97% of people say, yeah, it is a personal choice. But when you ask them, do you think we should ban factory farming? Do you think we should ban slaughterhouses? Do you think animals deserve the same right as people? Do you think we should end all animal farming? Then there's like about 20, 30, 40% of people who agree, right? So it seems like this huge discrepancy. Like most people think it's a personal choice, but then a third of them think that we should end slaughterhouses. So it seems a little weird at first, but then I try to bring it back to, like, for me, it's like driving. Like if somebody asked me, do you think driving is a personal choice? I would be like, yeah, it's a personal choice, but I want to ban the fossil fuel industry, which seems a little contradictory, but I understand why they would say that. And again, my argument is the majority of people think that veganism is a consumer frame. The majority of people, perhaps when we're there in person doing outreach and we're talking to them, perhaps there you can tell them, no, don't look at it through the consumer frame, look at it through the justice frame, and they'll get it once they're there with you. The issue is when we're not there, when we get headlines that say vegan protest movement, and they get that in their living rooms, and we're not there to explain that it's not a consumer frame, but that it's about justice. My fear is that they won't get it, and they'll immediately go back to, oh, these people pushing their diet, that is so pushy. You know, why do they want to push their diet? Like the gluten-free people don't do that. These people are so annoying, right? So that's the issue with having this frame, is that when you're not there to explain it, people think it's a diet. And I feel that, as I was saying about fossil fuels, like recognizing that, you know, I want fossil fuels to be banned, but I still fly, I still drive. I want plastic to be banned, and like at least single-use plastic, and like many types of environmental regulation that I want passed, but I still use them. So like I feel like recognizing that I'm a hypocrite in a different way, but I'm also a hypocrite, allows me to be open to people to joining the movement. So I think veganism keeps the movement pure, but keeps it small, because we're saying, if you want to march with us, you need to be able to have forsaken these products. And I think it keeps our movement small, when I don't think the environmental movement should stop people who still fly in airplanes. I think they should welcome them, and they should educate them, and they shouldn't be apologetic about the harms of it. But I think recognizing that we're all hypocrites in this way will allow us to bring more people in. And my other argument is that when you're comparing the two, when you're doing outreach, when you're doing a protest, I feel that anti-speciesism is a much stronger argument than veganism. Because when you're talking about anti-speciesism, you're going for discrimination, you're talking about justice, you're talking about rights, liberty. People get that, and it's really hard to argue and say that speciesism is okay. It's really hard. But when you're talking about veganism, I think veganism is a weaker argument than anti-speciesism, because veganism says live without causing as least harm as possible. And then you get into, well, but you're flying in airplanes, that's causing more harm than my piece of bread with honey that I ate. So why are you wearing those shoes? You know, why are you wearing this shirt? And you get caught up into these arguments about consumption and like, are you pure enough? So you get caught up in these consumption arguments when you're saying your argument is live as harmless as possible. It's like, oh, well, what about this? What about that? But when you talk about anti-speciesism is wrong, there's just no arguments against that. So I think that's a much stronger argument. And that's why the media immediately portrays us as vegans, because it's an easier argument. Oh, look at these hypocritical vegans. That's why people on the street immediately like, look at your shoes. They go after veganism because it's a weaker argument than anti-speciesism. And I know a lot of vegans say, well, it's the same. It's the same argument, right? But it's not in the majority of people's mind, because one is saying you should consume a certain way, and the other one is saying discrimination is wrong. And I think this one is a much stronger argument. So in summary, I just think the justice frame can get more people on board, and it can help people in personal transformation. It can help create systemic change. Like if we're trying to pass laws, we shouldn't call them vegan laws and then explain to people what that means. I think we should call them anti-animal cruelty laws, because people already knows what that means and they don't need to have us there explaining. So in summary, that's my second argument about framing.
Cool. Okay. So I'm glad I was writing stuff down, because that was a lot. So I'll start from the beginning. So the animal center is better than the human center was the major claim, with consumer frame being veganism and the animal center being the opposite. So I think that we need to consider that not everyone is a politician, and most people are not interested in politics, actually. I mean, they say they're not interested. Obviously they are. They'll be interested when they take a pay cut, right? But most people, they say, oh, I don't care about politics. I'm not interested. Most people just care about, how do I pay rent this week? How do I feed my family? How do I get that promotion at my job? How do I get to town because I want to go out drinking with my friends? This is the kind of stuff the average person deals with. The average person is not any kind of activist or any kind of political hero or any kind of political even interest. I mean, we're talking about the majority here, not the minority. So I think that the consumer message is absolutely necessary, because the majority of people, they're consumers. That is what they are. They are consumers first and foremost. And these political ideas we have, a lot of people that are just straight over their head. And I would say that's the majority of people. We have a very, very large population. And I just don't think that enough of them really care about politics to be giving them a message which is not consumer focused, because they are consumers and that's what they're interested in. Like, what do I buy? What do I not buy? Where do I go? Where do I not go? Give me some stuff that I can do. Give me some things that I can change. I feel like that message is very necessary for the majority of people. The other point you made about the people say it's a personal choice. And then they also say that, well, but I want to ban factory farms. I want to ban this. I want to ban that. We need to consider that people will say what they think they're supposed to say. Like, people do this all the time. Like some people, they won't particularly care whether or not factory farms are going. Some people will say like, yeah, you know, I'd rather they stopped. But when you say, okay, but that means you won't get any more meat, then they'll say, oh, no, keep them going then. You know, they'll say what they think they're supposed to say to save face, because they want to look moral. They want to look virtuous. Everybody does that. So I think we need to be careful again with these studies. These studies, I believe, were done over the telephone. So they weren't even, you know, face-to-face studies. It's very easy to be all virtuous on the phone when someone's asking you questions and tell the interviewer what you think they should hear. So I think that's what a lot of people do, to be honest with you. I also have another point about people thinking this is a diet. So they say this vegan protest movement thing, I think that's absolutely ridiculous. I've never heard of that before I saw your talk. I've never seen that in the media over here in Europe. Or in India, vegan protest movement, that is ridiculous that even gets, that just doesn't make any sense. I agree with you on that. Like, it's not a vegan protest movement, it's vegans protesting sure, but it's not a vegan protest movement. I feel like that's just a complete botch by the media, and they're always going to do that to us. This is what the media does. But on the same token, I don't truly believe that anyone watches a protest and says, why are they protesting for their diet? I believe they say that because they know exactly why we're protesting. They just don't want to admit it. They don't want to accept that what is happening to the animals is wrong. So they'll misunderstand it on purpose. And we need to consider that people will misunderstand things on purpose, especially if they do understand it, it means they have to change something that they like. They will go out of their way to misunderstand you and misrepresent you if it means that they can carry on doing things that they enjoy doing, right? Without feeling guilty. So I just think we've got to be careful again with these kinds of studies and what people say and do, because people don't say what they mean and they don't mean what they say. Everybody's trying to put a face on. We talked about driving and about how if people drive but they're against fossil fuels, I think that boils down to necessity. If somebody chooses to drive when they have the choice not to drive, then I would call them a hypocrite, and I would absolutely say they shouldn't call themselves an environmentalist. They shouldn't be a part of an environmental movement if they can't even change such a basic thing. Like if you have a choice and it's convenient for you, even if it's slightly inconvenient, if you can do it and be on time and everything be okay and it doesn't cost you too much money and everything's all right, it's not going to hurt you, then do it, make the effort. I mean, I think driving is an example of a thing that a lot of people have to do. Like they don't have a choice. There's no other way they can get to work, especially over in the States, right? You've got these huge distances between places. Not so much in Europe, but in the States for sure. And if somebody is protesting for fossil fuels to be banned, but still takes unnecessary flights and unnecessarily drives and unnecessarily uses fossil fuels, I would say it's inconsistent. I wouldn't say they shouldn't go to a march. Like, no, you can't ban people from marches. They're still going to come to marches. Like, you can't stop them from coming. So telling them not to come is my idea. In my mind, it's a null point. Don't come to the march if you're not vegan. It's pointless because they'll come whether you like it or not. You can't stop them. So in my eyes, it's more like, yeah, come if you're not vegan, but be aware that we're going to find you and we're going to talk to you, right? And we're going to reach out to you. And there's going to be a section of the march that is designed specifically for you, which happened in India. We had a march and I took the opportunity and I said, like, hey, is anybody here not vegan? And a few people raised their hands and I was like, right, this is for you. And I gave them a pretty strong message, and a lot of people around them also grabbed them and said, hey, let's talk. And I feel like if a march or a protest has that, then absolutely non-vegans should come along, and people who aren't, like, let's say they're not environmentalists yet, yeah, come along and learn for sure. But to enable them to continue not being vegan, to continue contributing, enabling them, I will never stand behind. There's a big difference between saying, come to the march and learn, or it's okay that you're not vegan, but come to the march. I feel like the message has to be clear that it's not okay, but still come because we want to help you. But it's not okay. Like you should change, right? It is hypocritical for you to march for these animals whilst you are their oppressor, but we still appreciate you coming and we want to learn, help you learn. So I think as long as the messaging is clear, then absolutely, I think non-vegans and such should come to these events. Like you said, it keeps the movement small. You were saying it keeps it too small because of that reason, like people are not allowed to come. I definitely agree that maybe some organizations are maybe too strict on that. They should be more relaxed with letting people come, but the message still has to be there, clear that yes, come, but it's not okay what you're doing. Like we shouldn't be enabling the abusive behavior. And I believe that anti-speciesism and veganism are absolutely like combined and connected. And I feel like the messaging, it can be and is the best to connect those two things. Like, for example, if you talked about like for example, like I talk about feminists again, they talk about systematic sexism, and that is the discrimination, and they link it to being a feminist, right? We talk about speciesism and we link it to being a vegan. People talk about civil rights and they link it to being against racism. So the discrimination has always been linked to a movement with a name, and that could be animal rights movement, it can be vegan movement. I mean, I'm not too picky, but I just don't think it's an argument in itself to completely drop the word vegan and replace it with anti-speciesist, because anti-speciesism and the message of let's be against that, in my eyes, that directly guides on a path to becoming a vegan. because I am against speciesism, and that's why I'm vegan. And if you're against speciesism, then you should be vegan too. I feel like this is the message I always use. And there was just 3 more points I wrote down from you, and then I'm done. So I believe that we need to talk about necessity and intent, because we're talking about like direct and indirect harm. So for example, if someone is driving a car, and we know that people die in car crashes all over the world, thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people die in car crashes. That's not the same as getting in your car and running somebody over. Right? So intent is really important. We consider intent. So if somebody is like, I'm paying for an animal to be killed, but I'm better than you because you took that flight you needed to take. Well, like, this is a very different argument, because I had no intention of hurting anyone when I took that flight, whereas you had every intention of hurting this animal. My flight may not have harmed any animals. It maybe did harm animals. I don't know. But you definitely harmed that pig. You definitely did that on purpose, and you did it for pleasure, and I did it for necessity. You know, I think it's really important to make sure we make the definitions of necessity and intent, and we don't just say that everything is bad, so let's just do our best. It's like, no, some things are worse. Some things that are done unnecessarily and with intent to harm are worse than things that are done out of necessity with no intention to harm. And veganism being a weaker argument than anti-speciesism, yeah, it is 100%. There's no doubt it's a weaker argument. And I feel like veganism, without talking about anti-speciesism, especially on news channels and stuff like that on TV, you're setting yourself up for a takedown. You're going to be taken down. I agree. But with most members of the public, it's not like that. Like it's not quite the same as that. Most members of the public are not aiming to take you out and, you know, rip you to pieces like somebody on a TV show would. So although I think anti-speciesism is good to introduce, I think for most members of the public, or for most I've met, it's a little bit too complex and a little bit too political and a bit frightening for people. When I've mentioned it, sometimes I find people backing off a little bit, like, well, this is a bit intense, man. Like, I don't like this. Like, it's a new form of discrimination. You're telling me it's the same as another racism, as sexism. I find maybe I'm offended. Maybe I don't like what you're saying. Whereas if we do focus on the animals and on their consumption, well, that's something they can get on board with, because I find a lot of people they would talk about what they do 3, 4, 5 times a day. They'll talk about their life, and we'll focus on their life because that's what they're interested in. They're interested in their life. They're interested in what they do and what they pay for and all these things. So the idea that discrimination is wrong, yes, and that's why you should be a vegan, that's the only bit I'd add on to that. I agree with you. That caveat for me needs to be in there as well. Yes, it's wrong to discriminate. All of the discriminations are wrong. So if you want to be against speciesism, then you should be a vegan. So that's the message that I would always, and I do always use. So that kind of wraps up my points on your points. I saw you made a few notes. You got okay. Some things you want to add now?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I made some notes too. That's a good idea to take notes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's see. Yeah. So okay. The first point about like people saying that that they want to ban factory farming because they want to look moral, but when you tell them, you know, you'd have to give up meat, they might be like, well, no, I actually don't want to. And I agree that I think some people are definitely just saying it because they want to look good, they want to feel good, saying, yeah, I agree with this, and maybe perhaps they don't grasp the implications of what banning slaughterhouses would actually do. So I do think, like, out of those, 30% of people who said that, perhaps half of them are, or maybe 2/3 of them are lying or deceiving themselves. But that would still leave, who knows, like 10% of people who like actually want to close down factory farms, but then maybe the reason that they are not doing it themselves and going vegan themselves is because they think, well, how is that going to help animals, right? When you talk to them about like 10 billion animals, a year, whatever, in the US, immediately they're like, okay, so like, what is my going vegan going to do? So maybe like, if we give them like a systemic solution, like, would you agree to this? Like, if everyone closes slaughterhouses and we find alternative meats and we put them anywhere, like, yeah, I'd be on board for that. But me changing my own personal consumption, maybe they don't feel like it's going to create a big enough change. And I think, like I said, in the same reason, I continue driving, but I would ban fossil fuels. I just, but I think, like, you're right. Some people are just saying that to look good, but I think some people could be swayed if we have a campaign to close factory farms. I think we could get a lot of non-vegans on board. Little do they know that 99% of animal products come from factory farms. But if we have a campaign to ban factory farms, maybe it doesn't succeed the first time around, but it gets a lot of exposure to the issue. So I think focusing on just like ending factory farms as opposed to go vegan yourself, I think we could get a lot of people. About the driving thing, I think that's a point that we're going to have to dig in more, because I feel that people who drive when it's slightly inconvenient should still be allowed in the movement. So this is something that we can get into. One day maybe they're feeling tired, or they had a fight last night with their friend, whatever, and they're just like, you know what, I don't want to take public transportation. I'm stressed. I'm already putting in the effort to go into this march, and I just feel like driving right now. And yeah, I'm a hypocrite. I don't care. I just want the convenience right now. It looks like it might rain. I'm gonna do it anyway. So I feel that they should be able to come, and that when they're there, I don't want to be like, okay, you're here, but who drove to this march? When they could have taken public transportation? All right, you guys drove. Okay, well, you need to stop driving, so and so. I feel like my purpose is for those people to feel empowered, to keep coming back the next time we have a march, the next time I can get them to call their governor. So I'd rather like win them over and keep them coming back. And I totally agree that we're not saying it's okay to eat animals. We should never absolutely say that it's okay to eat animals, that it's okay to eat their secretions. We definitely would never say that. But I would just say, I just wouldn't talk about food. I would just say, look, this is the bill that we're trying to pass. Thank you all for coming. We're having a plant-based potluck after this. Come and join us. Like, trying to create a friendship with them and not trying to outreach them when they're there and make them feel like you are a hypocrite because you're over there and I'm over here and I already achieved enlightenment and I'm not harming anyone, but you are harming beings unfairly. So I think that we should welcome them and obviously not enable them and say that it's okay, but just like focus mostly on trying to keep bringing them back so they can keep participating and in the things that they probably already agree with, which is like things like banning factory farms. With feminism, I feel like, yeah, they're focused on like the patriarchy and the systemic injustices, but their ask is not stop buying from companies that are sexist, boycott companies that are sexist. I think that would be a very specific ask that I think it's like similar to the vegan one. It's not like don't hurt women. Like, of course, if somebody's an abuser, then that's dangerous for them to be at the march. But if the ask is don't buy from companies that do X, Y, and Z, I think like you're just gonna end up in a consumption policing battle. So I think the feminist movement should not be male focused. I think it should be because like the males are the perpetrators. I think it should be female focused. Yeah, you can address the issues of the patriarchy, but I would say it should be messages about women, not like, hey, please stop buying from these companies that are known to be sexist. With regards to the flight, and I think in this case, I honestly think that this might be another point that we might have to get into, is that I think that the outcome is more important than the intent. so if the intent is to fly, and it's like, you know, I don't think this is gonna harm animals that much, and I want to fly because it'll take me 6 days of driving across the country, and I can use the time for something better. Maybe I can do more activism if I fly, you know, some way to justify it. I feel like the outcome is more important than the intent, because I think like flying does have a lot, because more harm than animal. Like I said, somebody who eats a piece of bread with dairy as opposed to somebody who flies, I don't care what the intent is. I care about the results, and the person who's flying is causing a lot more harm, even if it's indirect, even if you don't see it as closely as you do with the dairy. But I think that's irrelevant. I think the total harm is more important. That, oh, it doesn't seem like it harmed that much. Like, I can't see the harm, therefore it's like less. I feel like the actual outcomes, the damage that flying causes, and I think it's pretty clear that flying is one of the worst things that we can do. I think, to me, that's more important than the intent. And then, like you said, in the media, like if you go in the media and you're setting yourself up to debate veganism, like you said, you're like setting yourself up to be caught in these consumption arguments. So I think it's the same, or maybe even worse, when you have a headline that uses the word vegan. Maybe it doesn't say vegan protest movement or something, but I just think any headline that says vegan in it is going to cause the same reaction in people's minds. And of course, some people are always going to disagree regardless of what you call yourselves. But I feel like there's another group of people that if you call yourself animal rescuer, animal rights activist, like, of course, there's some people that are not going to like that. But like you said, if you're setting yourself up for the media, if you don't have that one-on-one argument, I think using an animal-centered focus is stronger, like you said, and then therefore we should avoid the word vegan. And finally, about the inclusion exclusion, to be able to be like this pure and say, to tell people you can't come because you made this choice, or you will come, but I'm going to try to change you right away. I think that excludes people that don't have the ability to be as pure, people that are low income, people that have been systemically disenfranchised. And I think that's why the vegan movement is so white, is because we're saying you have to be able to do this, do this, do this. And then we tell them, well, potatoes and rice are so cheap, you can be vegan off of potatoes and rice. But then we don't do that. We buy expensive vegan ice cream and cheese and all these products, but we tell them, yeah, you should just eat beans and rice. So I feel that this mentality of like excluding people is a little, because of their consumption, is a little problematic. And if we don't exclude them, if we say, well, it's not practicable and possible for these people to do it, then somebody who just depends on food banks, then if they're eating dairy from the food bank, then they should be called vegan too, because that's what's practicable and possible for them. And then it just seems weird that somebody be vegan even though they're consuming dairy, but that's the only thing they can do because they don't have any other options. Okay. So yeah, that was a lot.
That's all right. Yeah, sure. So no, it's good. That's a lot to think about. I've got some points. Let me just go back to where you started. All right. So where were we up to? So driving, yeah, and convenience, and talking about being a hypocrite with driving. That's how we began. And if somebody's feeling tired or feeling kind of lazy or all these things, and they drive, and then, okay, they shouldn't be, you know, let's say attacked or excluded for that, or they shouldn't get to the march, and you said and be told like, hey, who drove here today? Like, you feel like that's not a good thing. And as much as I understand that, I also like would say that this kind of messaging is really important, because like people use these same arguments to justify eating animal products. They say, I had a bad day, look, don't judge me, I had a bad day, and like I had a bad argument with my partner, so I just had to eat some dairy ice cream. And what if we don't challenge that, then we are allowing we are enabling them. And I mean, I know you said we're not enabling them, but if we don't challenge it, we are absolutely enabling them to continue doing that without challenge. So I would say if somebody did drive to a march, and I'm personally, like, this is a separate topic. I'm not personally so, let's say, passionate about the environmental side of things. I don't know enough about it. I have looked into it somewhat. I know the damage of fossil fuels, but my main priority is animal exploitation and ending it. And I feel like the animal agriculture industry by itself is enough of a challenge without bringing driving and things into it as well. So I do really focus on that side of things. And I know you're focusing on both. With your studies, I understand why. For me, I have some learning to do on that side. But yeah, I would, if I was holding an environmental march, I would always give that message to people. Like, I would do it maybe in a, with driving, I would do it in a more jokey way, because there's not a direct victim of that decision. It's not like somebody driving here directly caused somebody to have their throat slit. So I would be able to address that, and I would recommend addressing that in a more jovial way, and like, come on guys, we know we're not supposed to do this. Whereas when it comes to the direct harm of a victim, like a pig or like a cow, if you, like you were saying, the dairy example, then I believe that the point needs to be made, like, who here is not a vegan? And like, guys, come on, like, look at what you're contributing to. Like, we're out here for the animals, so let's be consistent and let's not go home and keep abusing them. I feel like if we don't address it, then we are enabling them. And my main concern with this, if we don't address it at the march, or we don't address it at the event, that you're not a vegan and you're still contributing, if we don't say something, then these people go home happy with what they did. Like, I did something today, and now I get to treat myself with ice cream, or I get to treat myself with this burger or this pizza of animal products because today I did something for the animals. And that kills me inside to imagine somebody going home and doing that and feeling good whilst paying for my friends to be abused. Like, I cannot handle that on a personal level, and on an impersonal level, it's too much. I can't take that. So the idea just keeps me awake at night, and I could never be a part of an event that happily welcomed these people without addressing the fact that they contribute to the injustices they're trying to fight against. I would always need to do something. So I do agree, though, that we shouldn't exclude them. I'm not saying exclude these people. As I said, we can't do it. Even if we wanted to, it's not possible. We can't exclude them. So let them come, but we need to talk about it, in my opinion. And you mentioned something about the feminist movement, not asking people to boycott companies. I don't have an example from the feminist movement, but I do have an example from, I believe Black Lives Matter did this. There was Papa John's. He made racist remarks, the CEO, and they were able to, by boycotting, they were able to force him to resign, I believe. And also they completely rebranded the company and made it all like, well, obviously not ethical to us, but ethical in the sense of that it was no longer linked with racism. So that was something that was achieved by boycott. So, I mean, other movements are boycotting companies that go against their ethics. So I think that's something that's happening. The outcome versus intent, like flying versus eating the animals, I see that as a bit of a false equivalency, because I feel like the necessity is completely different. Like, somebody needs to take a flight, like they need to take a flight, let's imagine, like then that's the reasons to do or not to do that are very different than somebody deciding to eat dairy, and also the effort it takes. So of course, like I would also rather not fly. But I'm in India, and I came here to do the work that I did, and I saw it as a necessary evil to enable me to do what I came here to do, right? So to say no to that would have been a very big, important decision that would have taken a lot of, a lot more money to get here, or just not to come here at all, or then that would mean animal save movement would have been delayed here by maybe a long time, like maybe it wouldn't have started up. Who knows what could have happened? But I took a risk, and I made that decision to come here, and it took a lot. Whereas simply replacing one item with another, like not consuming dairy, that for the not average person, but for a lot of people, that is a very simple thing to do, and it's very easy. And that's why it's often said that it's the first thing we can do. It's the minimal effort we can make, is just to not consume the products. Because it really is, in my eyes, the first thing and that somebody can do to show and to do something for the animals, and to show yeah, I'm in this for the animals. And people, yeah, this is something that's interesting as well. You were talking about how people, they don't like it. They don't like being told by vegans. They don't like looking at, you know, seeing the messaging from vegans. But the thing is, people, when people who smoke, when they meet somebody else who just quit smoking, they hate them, right? They hate them. Like, they'll talk about, I hate you, stop talking about quitting smoking, I hate it, I can't quit. When somebody, when you'll know this is like, it's a guy thing, I think. I mean, people can say in the chat, is this also a girl thing? I don't know, but I know from my group of like guy friends that if we are in a group with our partners, and if one of those guys is like really good, like he's very compassionate and he's attentive and he's doing all the right things and he's being super sweet and super nice, and all the girls are like, or whoever's there, the partners are like, oh, he's so lovely, he's so lovely. I'm telling you now, all the other people, they hate that guy because he's showing them up. He's showing me up. He's making me look bad. Stop making me look bad. Stop being so sweet. So we always dislike people who we perceive to be doing something that's more noble or more virtuous or like better than us. When in actuality, maybe it's not always the case, but we don't like the feeling of being inadequate compared to somebody else. So my point is, the messaging, whether it's vegan, anti-speciesist, animal rescue, animal liberation, animal rights, doesn't matter, because the message is saying you're inadequate because we're doing this and you're currently contributing to the opposite of this. So they're not going to like us. And it's just that simple. They're not going to like us. Like all the other social justice movements in history have had the same problem, because people don't like to face the fact that they are being oppressive. They don't like it. It pisses them off. It makes them feel inadequate. So I think that we just have to deal with that no matter what messaging we use. And finally, the last point you made, potatoes and rice, that we don't do that, and the white veganism thing. It's an interesting one, because I am in India and I've met a lot of people, quite obviously in India. India's a third world country. So I've met a lot of people, and we've talked about this a lot, the idea that, okay, maybe can some people not be vegan in India? And actually, to my surprise, the answer has been yes, maybe in some very remote urban areas. Urban? Is that right? I don't know. Some very remote areas of India, people would struggle. But actually, the majority of people here, they're already eating plant-based food because that's what's cheap. So lentils, rice, potatoes, all the different vegetables, that's the cheapest food that they can get here. So if you go to the street food is what most of the poorest people in India eat. And the street food is like 99% plant-based. Like sometimes they use ghee, which is like a deduction from milk, but that's expensive. So actually most of them don't even use that. So as a vegan in India, street food, if you want to risk it on your stomach, it's quite easy to eat street food vegan, because pretty much all of it is already plant-based. So it varies from country to country, of course, like this example. But my point is that, yeah, maybe there are a lot of rich vegans, fine. There are a lot of rich vegans, and those rich vegans are clearly the loudest. And for some reason, yeah, there's a lot of white vegans. But I don't see that as some kind of proof that veganism is elitist just because there are a lot of rich white vegans. Like, they're the loudest ones, for sure. Yeah, they're the loudest ones. They're the ones on YouTube. They're the ones on Instagram. But there are still massive black vegan movements. You know, there's like Hip Hop is Vegan. There's like, there's another one, Hip Hop is it Hip Hop is Green? Sorry, Hip Hop is Green. There are other movements of people of color. And then obviously there's the entire vegan India movement here as well. Like, so this is like thousands of people here in India who are also, you know, vegan movement. So I think it's just about, yeah, who's getting the most coverage. Yeah, white vegans get the most coverage, there's no doubt. But I think that's probably more of an issue with social media than it is with the movement. I think that's a social media problem we've got, you know, with the outreach movement too. Like Ed and James and Joey are like the three key ones. I wouldn't say it's a problem. I would say it's a symptom of who got there first, who started making videos first. It's those guys. So they're the ones that are famous. I don't think that's a symptom of such of elitism or racism, you know? So I guess that would summarize my thoughts on those points, yeah. I mean, I have to just pause for 1 second because my memory card and my camera's just run out, and I really want to film this. Is it okay we just take a quick breather?
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Everyone
Let's do it. I'll go to the bathroom.
Okay,
and maybe Cheyenne can read through the comments and see if there's any questions or any clarifications that we need to make.
Yeah, I've been keeping track of everything here, so go ahead and take a little bit of a leg stretch. I know people are very active in the comments. So if there's anything specific that needs to be addressed that's been coming up a lot, please let me know. There's just too many comments for me to go through them all. But yeah, I've been keeping up with the comments for the most part. You can send me a private message and I'll be more likely to get it then. And just another reminder that we will be taking questions at the end of this little debate. I'm not sure exactly how long it'll go on, but we'll just see what makes most logical sense. And then we'll take some questions and David and Orlando can answer those for everyone. But in the meantime, if you have any questions, please write them down and just wait till the end. And please remember to keep yourself muted through the duration of the debate. Thank you.
All right, I'm back. I don't know if David is back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let me just,
we're all ready to go.
Let's get my mics back on. What's going on here? I'm all tangled up. All right.
Cable salad. Like it.
What's that?
Cable salad.
Wait, so I can't tell what you're saying, man.
All right, I think we can get back into it.
Okay.
Cabbage salad?
Is that what he's saying? Cabbage salad? I can't tell.
Maybe.
No, cable salad.
Cable salad. Oh, okay. Yes, exactly. That's what I heard.
All right, I'm gonna jump back into it with the point about direct cause versus indirect cause. I feel that in the vegan world, it's often misattributed, like the directness of the cause. And I hear vegans say like people who eat animals are murderers. Like I've heard that, like people who eat animals are sexually abusing cows. And you know, I don't think it's that direct. I also think that there's a degree of separation. And again, once we take subsidies into account, buying a dairy ice cream is not direct harm to cows because they've already been abused. It's been paid for by the government, whatever. So I don't think that there's that directness. So in the same way that flying, it's not that direct. I feel like we're talking about degrees of directness, right? And then who decides what that threshold is about, like where you draw that line of like, that's too direct, we can't do that. And this other thing is like, well, that's a necessary evil, and it's like far enough removed. And I think if most vegans educated themselves on like the actual harms of flying, and especially the harm to wild animals that is caused by climate change, I think we would realize that in some cases, even though it may seem less direct, we're causing a lot more harm to animals by using fossil fuels. So I think that there's necessary evils. Deciding what is a necessary evil and what isn't is just going to get us into a lot of disagreements that we don't have if we just focus on anti-speciesism. So yeah, we all contribute to the injustices, unfortunately, even when we don't have to. Like we pay taxes, then go to subsidies, and of course we could move to a different country that doesn't give subsidies, but yeah, it's just this conversation about what's the necessary evil and what's not, that it just gets us into trouble about trying to measure directness. When we're talking about boycott, I agree that targeted, directed boycotts can have pretty strong results. Like if you're targeting one company, like Papa John's, or you're targeting one industry, I think those types of boycotts can be very powerful and can take down an industry. The problem is that vegans are trying to boycott all industries at all times, right? All animal abusing industries. So I think when you're spread out that thin, you're going to get very few people on board that are able to boycott all these industries. Whereas if we just all said we're just focusing on dairy, and we can get everyone else on board and welcome everyone that wants to focus just boycott dairy, I think we can actually do more damage if we have a more directed boycott as opposed to a general boycott like that. And like you said, like it's not easy to replace driving, but it's so easy to replace animal products. And I don't think that's the case for everyone. I think people that grew up in a certain culture and their family, their mom, you know, all their friends are eating animals, that it's not just so easy for them to do it, that we should be, you know, almost like publicly calling them out for it, because a lot of them it's not so easy for them. It might be easier for them to stop using plastic, but then we still say, well, you're not doing enough because you're not changing your food habits, when it might not be so easy. And I don't think that in general that vegans are like more noble, more virtuous. There's a lot of racist, polluting vegans, but just because they have the label vegan, they feel that they're more virtuous or more noble, and then that puts them on this pedestal where everyone else is an animal abuser, and I, the vegan, I'm pure and noble. So I think that mentality of not researching the harms that we're doing with our other lifestyle choices and just thinking that we're not harming, but when they are, I agree. I think that that's a problem. And yeah, some people are going to for sure feel inadequate when we tell them that we're not participating. Some people will feel guilty, definitely, but I think not everyone. I think some people will be affected by the language. So some people, some vegans keep saying, well, everyone's gonna hate us anyway. They're never gonna like us. And I agree that there's a certain percentage of the population that no matter what language we use, they will always be against us because they feel guilty, because they think animals don't feel pain. Yeah, there's a certain percentage that will never like us. And I'm not arguing about them. Like, them, you're never going to convince. But there is a part that if you tell them, hey, do you want to call your governor and tell them to stop animal cruelty, pass this bill? They're like, yeah, I'll do that. But and I think we should welcome them. So those are the people that I'm talking about, the people that will change depending on what language we use. In India, thankfully for thousands of years, they've had these diets where they eat a lot of plants and spices. But in Europe and in the United States, we have this diet, like the standard American diet of like pizza and hamburgers, which is what's been made cheap by our system. So all these low-income people just don't have the ability to do it here as easily as they do in India. So I think like asking people, raise your hand if you're not vegan, you're gonna end up having a lot of low-income people that are gonna be like, yeah, I'm not, you know, maybe they don't have a strong support system that would support them. Maybe they don't have the knowledge or the time to spend doing research about B12 and how that works with your body. So I think it's not that easy here to convince people to go vegan, just like it's not easy to convince people to stop flying or driving. So I'd rather like not shame people, call them out, like raise your hand if you're not vegan. Oh, you. I think I'd rather just keep them coming back. And yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, that was a lot of points again, okay. But I think that's it.
Cool, man. That's all good. Cool. so again, I made some notes. So we talked about, all right, the direct versus indirect, and people people not being murderers, or they're not responsible for like raping cows. A lot of vegans say this stuff, and I think that I think the messaging around this is quite important. That I mean, no one actually thinks. I mean, I don't know if people actually think this. I don't think a lot of people actually believe that like the individual that made the purchase is directly responsible or directly murdered someone. But the fact of the matter is that their money definitely contributed to that system and that thing continuing to happen. So maybe that money that they paid for an ice cream didn't rape a cow, but it will rape a cow. Like it will happen because of that money. Like somebody will be murdered from your dollar. Not right now. Yeah, true. The one you're eating right now, that wasn't your fault. That was the last person's fault. But the next one will be your fault because that money, you've given them profit. You've told them, I want this to continue when you gave them that money. So I think that the whole, I'm not completely behind the idea of like vote with your dollar. I think there is a lot of like intricacies with that, right? But it's the most simplistic way to explain to somebody, because most people, as I said, that is what they think about. They think, how can I make a difference? I'm just a person that wants to live. I don't have time to be an activist. I don't have time to I just want to pay my rent. I just want to go to work. I just want to build a family. Okay, then vote with your dollar, because if that's all you can do, then please do that, right? Because a lot of people, they don't do what you and me do. They don't have the time. They don't have the passion. Not yet, maybe in the future, but in that moment, they don't have that yet. So what can you do? Vote with your dollar. That's how you can do some kind of, not activism obviously, but it is a beginning. So I think that's how I see it. What you were talking about with fossil fuels, I agree with you. I think that people, vegans especially, you know, if we are talking about being ethical and we are talking about I hate talking about reducing harm. That's not my message at all, reducing harm. I think it's soft. I think it's a weak message that we're out here to reduce harm. No, we're not. We're out here because we're against animal exploitation and we want to stop it. That's why we're out here, right? Forget reducing harm. I just want it all to stop. I don't want them to be more comfortable or, you know, kill them quicker. No, I want it to stop. That's why I'm here. So I think that if fossil fuels are directly linked to some of this happening, so animals being exploited, then I think that, yeah, we should be talking about that. And if we're not talking, I don't see that as a negative point of veganism. I see that as a negative point of vegan educators. Like the ones who are leading the charge, let's say, the ones who are the most famous or the most influential, they should be talking about these other things then. But again, it is about, are we spreading ourselves too thin? Because at the end of the day, you know, if animal agriculture is the biggest cause of animal exploitation, and that should be the focus. But if you're saying it, or somebody else says, actually, fossil fuels do more damage to animals and they exploit more animals, then okay, the movement should probably switch and start focusing on that instead. You know, but we can't do everything at the same time. So I do think there needs to be a focus, and that's what you said as well. Spreading ourselves too thin. And this is I had a conversation with some people from Unoffensive Animal about this actually, and I agree with them. I didn't at the time, but now I do. And they were saying, imagine if we got all of the animal save groups, all of the AV groups, and we focused them all on just one thing at a time, like not one thing as in like just chickens but one company at a time for like 3-month periods. So for example, we just exposed Nando's, right? And we've been to some farms that supply Nando's. So every Cube of Truth TV in the world is showing that footage from Nando's, whilst the animal save guys are going to vigils where they know the slaughterhouses that supply Nando's are. So that we do that every 3 months, and I agree with you. That is so focused, laser focused, and eventually the message gets out there that this is not just a Nando's thing. This is an anti-speciesism thing. This is a vegan thing. This is not just Nando's. It's all. But we could definitely take down individual campaigns and individual businesses and probably bring about some more focused change. And I agree with that concept. I think it's really cool. I think that would be very, very effective. I think we'd see a lot more progress very quickly and big results. So I don't disagree with that. But again, I don't see that as a reason to not promote veganism. I see that this all can take place for me while still giving a vegan message. I don't see that as a dichotomy. And And we talked about growing up with culture. You just talked about some people it's not easy. Absolutely, that's probably the hardest thing. Like, it's not food availability, it's not cost. It's normally the community that is the biggest problem for people, that not being accepted and all these things. But I think that is our job. I think that that's what I see myself. Like, when people ask me, like, oh, what do you do the most? What do you talk to people about the most? It's not nutrition, it's not availability, it's not cost, it's not recipes, it's people. That's what we talk about the most. My mum won't accept me. My brother's being mean to me. My husband still eats meat. My kids won't stop. And all these people. This is the stuff that we talk about on a daily basis. And I see that as pretty much my main job. I've seen that's what I've been doing. And I think that as activists, I think that has to be a large part of what we do, is helping people make these changes and helping them bring it into their family unit and their community in a productive way, rather than a way that's going to make their lives difficult. And it's not that hard, actually. Once it comes to it, once you give people a few pointers like, hey, don't try not to focus so much on the people around you, because they're the ones that are going to cause you the most pain when they reject you. Instead, why don't you go out and do some work with like DxE or AV or Save, and work with other people, and then the people around you are going to see you doing that, and that's a better way to influence them because you're too close to them. That's the advice I give to people, and normally it works out pretty well. So it's, the difficulties of the home life can be handled, is my point. You mentioned that vegans aren't more noble. That's for sure true. Yeah, there's loads of bad vegans out there. And I think what I was meaning when I said that more noble, I meant in the sense that the people that are currently contributing to animal abuse, they see somebody that isn't, and it makes them feel inadequate. I'm not saying the person who isn't is particularly like better in every way, but in that one way, they are better. And that's enough for somebody else to feel like not jealous, but let's say inadequate, and start to get pissy. Because just that in that one little thing, it bugs them because they are not that. It doesn't need to be just this. It can be anything. It could be the smoking thing. In that one way that person's not smoking and you still are, that bugs you and you don't like that person. It doesn't matter what else they're doing, that one thing, because that's what they're talking about, it annoys you. So I don't think it's necessarily that we are more noble, but in that one way, maybe people, they see us as more noble, it bugs them. And some will be affected by language for sure. Yeah, there's no doubt. But my personal inkling to this is that I feel like the majority of people, like I said earlier, if given the chance to misunderstand, they will misunderstand on purpose, because that's just, they don't want to change. People hate change. They really hate it. I mean, we know this, that they don't want to change. They're not interested in changing. They need to be pushed. And then eventually they see that it makes sense. So I think we can do what you're saying as well as the existing system. I think that we can welcome people to do these things where you're like, okay, call your governor, talk to your MP, whilst at the same time saying, also like, it would be great if you changed too, because it's all good and well when you call your MP, member of parliament, or your governor or whatever, but you could also make an impact with your dollar. So how awesome is that? Not only are you going to change the system, but you could also affect the system and affect things with your money. I think that's a really good message. I think that both of these would be really good. And you talked about the low-income diet in the USA and it being hamburgers and pizza and stuff, and that really sucks. And I understand that some people would feel bad about that, and I get that. I think a lot of people, if they couldn't afford it or they couldn't do it because of food availability, it would make them feel crap. And I'm totally with you on that. But I don't think that is a reason not to give them the message. I feel like not giving them the message because they can't afford to act on it, I find that quite offensive, actually. I think that they would say, hey, don't exclude the message from me just because I can't afford it. Like, tell me what you want to say. Like, give it to me straight, right? I feel like we should respect them enough to tell them the truth, even if they can't afford or they can't do it, because I feel like that's a level of respect. I feel like if we start censoring our message for certain groups because of their financial situation, that's really risky, and I wouldn't want to do that. So yeah, I guess overall I'm still definitely on the side of, like, I see all of this being compatible with keeping the word. I don't see a convincing argument to get rid of the word. I think Cheyenne wants to say something. I can see her in my...
Yeah, Just really quickly, I think both of you guys are kind of getting into monologues at this point, so maybe just shorten up the time a bit so that like we can have direct points to each argument and things like that, and we can.
All right.
But it's on both sides, so it's not just you. Also, yeah, I'll just say that.
Okay, that's cool.
Okay, yeah, I'll just respond to a couple of points really quickly. Yeah, some people don't have the time and the passion. We can tell them that all they can do is vote with their dollars. That's great. I agree with that. But we can do that without giving them this identity, like black and white. You either are this or you're not. It's just like, hey, do the best that you can, reduce the harm with your dollar, and great, thanks for trying. Not like, okay, you reach this point after which you've made it. It's just like, okay, you know, reduce the harm with your dollar. Please do that, but not without having to use a label that most people misunderstand. Like you said, most people will misunderstand given a chance. So let's make it easier for them to just talk about like things that they agree with. The spreading yourself too thin.
Sorry, could we go like, maybe point by point, or how do you want to do this? Because they were talking, they were talking about like, so like, let's go, I don't know, let's stick on this point until we feel like it reaches a conclusion, and then you go for the next one you had written down, and we'll just do that.
Yeah, perfect.
Perfect. I think like what humans, the thing is with humans is that we're pack animals, and we love to feel included, and people love this identity, and I understand that a lot of people in the chat, I can see them saying, we don't need an identity, we don't need this identity. That's great for you because you already have the identity in the community, right? Of course you don't need the identity anymore. You've got DxE, you've got each other. But for a lot of people that are brand new into this, they do need that. Like they need that. They want this title, this like, okay, so if I don't do this, that makes me a vegan, that makes me a something. Like, I feel like people like that because it gives them a sense of like, I belong somewhere now, I have something that I can identify with, or something I can find other people, I can find my food in the supermarket, I can tell other people why I don't, you know, because at the beginning it's quite difficult to explain what you're doing and why. So just the idea of like saying, I'm a vegan and people will get it, it's nice for the beginning, especially because it's not so easy to, so I feel like it still is needed in that sense. Maybe not for you, obviously, or for a lot of people, maybe not, but for a lot of people, yeah, I think they still need it. And
yeah, I think
it's worth not telling them not to use it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I agree that people need an identity. I just don't think that boycott identity is like the best identity to build around. It can be like a justice identity, and it's not like about your consumption particularly. Like, we should have this identity, but it should be based around something else that's not like you and your consumption, and like that's the identity of like how pure you are in your consumption. So I think we can have a better identity that is not as universally misunderstood and as focused on like me changing my things.
Yeah, I don't think it is necessarily only consumer focused though, because like if for example, like if somebody is a vegan and they go out and they decide to go and like kick a dog in the face, that has nothing to do with consumption, but that would be against veganism, because veganism is being against exploitation. And if you're kicking an animal in the face, you're exploiting the animal, you're kicking them for your pleasure. So I think there's maybe a lack of, I don't know, maybe like we've got different definitions of what this means, because like if someone's abusing an animal, like actually abusing an animal, then they cannot be a vegan, even if they eat plant-based in every other way and all these things. If they're abusing an animal, they wouldn't be a vegan. So I think it is a moral imperative, it's a moral stance, and I think anti-speciesism is absolutely a part of veganism. I think it is within it. So I don't know that it's only a boycott movement. It's definitely a boycott movement, but I don't think it is only a boycott movement. I think it's definitely more than that, in the way I see it.
Right, but like I said, we're like defining the edges of it kind of arbitrarily. Like flying, well, that's spreading ourselves too thin. Like buying an iPhone that has minerals that were mined by slaves, like, yeah, we didn't cause harm with that direct phone that we bought, but your money will be used to enslave somebody in the future. Yeah, right. So but like you said, it's like it is spreading ourselves too thin of like trying to go into every single thing But since we don't
Yeah.
want to do that, then we arbitrarily choose these things, and then we get it caught up arguing about like, is that the right borders to draw or not?
Right. I don't think it's arbitrary though, because I think that the reason that we choose these things is because of what the severity of them. Like, I mean, with the reason that veganism focuses on non-human animals is because these other causes have groups. Like, there's something like, I think in the USA, it's something like 3% of all charity money goes to farmed animals and 97% goes to every other cause, and they're all human. So, I mean, the human causes like this one you just mentioned, they absolutely have people fighting for them. Whereas non-humans and especially farmed animals, they have this tiny minority of people that we are in. So I think it's not arbitrary. I think it's actually based on the severity and the necessity of where we need to put our time and our money and our efforts. So that's why I think a lot of people don't focus on this. By the way, what you said about the iPhone and the slavery, that is definitely an important point, and it is a human rights issue. And I wouldn't say somebody who is buying iPhones as a vegan is a hypocrite, but I would say that it is on some level, it is a little bit inconsistent to be calling yourself an ethical person whilst committing, paying for things that are clearly unethical. Absolutely. I think there needs to be some more consistency. I wouldn't say that's a vegan issue. I would say that's somebody being consistent or not issue. Like, you can be a vegan who is inconsistent with other causes and other ethical decisions. I think we could all do with being a bit more ethical, me included. I mean, I've made a lot of changes. What you were talking about, I learned about that. I learned about other things. It's not about me, obviously, but I'm just saying that I think we could all make more efforts to be ethical as we learn about more things that are unethical. But I don't see that completely taking down veganism. I don't see that as a reason that we shouldn't talk about or be vegan. I think I think we can have it together. I think it can coincide.
Right. I just think, like, as we keep educating ourselves and finding all the other ways that we're causing harm, we're just going to keep spreading ourselves too thin. And like, it just seems like obsessing over purity and like putting more and more effort tracing supply chains and all this and educating ourselves more and more until we end up living in a cave. And it's like, okay, now I'm 100% pure vegan. So it seems like the vegan movement is becoming like more and more exclusive as we learn more. That's like wine, and then like all these products, and then it's like, okay, maybe flying is way more harmful, so then flying too. And I just think like this continuing expansion and like I said, like obsession a little bit with like my personal purity, I would say like, okay, let's just like stay where we are and keep trying to live in line with our values. I think that's really important, but use the extra energy in the political system, as opposed to trying to go from 97.5% purity to 98% purity. I'm at that point, it's just like, how is this helping,
Sure. You say living within our values, and that's what I totally agree with, which is why I think this learning and expanding our knowledge is necessary. Because if we are like consuming something or using something that is causing animals to be exploited, and we have not done the due diligence to find it out, then we're not living by our values. So I think they're intricately connected. I think this expanding knowledge to find out what is more and more harmful. I think the example of going and living in a cave eventually is definitely the furthest extreme of how this could go. I don't think it would need to come to that point. But the problem is that the world that we have, as you definitely know, the world that we have is not built for ethical people. It's not built that way. The stuff you're talking about, the political side of things, changing the system, we're trying to create that way of living, right? That the more ethical way of living. We're trying to create this world where we can all live as not like you call it pure vegan, but live in line with our values, which are vegan, anti-speciesist values. That's what we're trying to get to. But it's still as important that people are noting the things that are not in line with their values. Like, for example, if you find out that wine is filtered through fish skin and with fish oil, then by consuming that wine, you're not living within your values, and you're actually contributing to that system that you're against. So I just feel like it's really important that not only are we saying I'm against it, but we're actually saying I'm against it and I don't contribute to it because I'm against it. I think it's not a purity thing. It is living within your values. It's living in line with your values. And if you make a mistake, if you didn't know something and someone tells you, that's not like you're not pure, you're not vegan. I've never said that, and I've never heard of anyone saying that. The only time I've heard people say that is when somebody said, I consume dairy and I consider it to be vegan because the cows are treated well. Now that is somebody in denial or not knowing. And if after being educated, they don't listen or they don't agree or they continue doing it, then of course someone's going to say to them, hey, look, like, don't call yourself vegan because you're harming animals and you're ignoring it. But if someone makes an honest mistake, you say, look, don't worry about it, right? Here's why you did what you did and here's what's wrong with it. And, you know, we move on. I don't think that any of that is negative enough to say, let's drop it and let's stop saying it because of these problems.
Yeah, I just want to, just one last point, and then maybe we can get to question. I think, like, I agree that, but my point is that, not like you said, no one is living in line with our values. None of us are. So that's the point for me. It's like vegans think, oh, I'm living in line with my values. You are not. But the reality is no one is living in line with their values because it's impossible to do this in this world. So instead of trying to keep changing our consumption and to be able to live in line with our values, we should recognize why are we not living in line with our value is because of these systemic issues that are making it really difficult, and then changing those as opposed to changing our behavior, because we're never going to be able to live in our values within the system. So I'm saying change the system and stop pretending that we're ethically living in line with our values, which then that puts us in this mentality where we see everyone else as evil and not recognizing that we also are not living in line with our values.
Sure. I think that the idea that you become vegan so you are living in line with your values, I do agree that a lot of people get into this mindset of like, I've reached perfection, whereas it's not true. For me, and for most people that I know, like it's defined as you're avoiding animal exploitation, you're doing your absolute best, you're trying to find out all the ways that it's happening. So yeah, you're right. It's not a possible thing to be 100% vegan, but then it's not a reason not to try. This is my point. It's not a reason not to go and make the effort and to say, yes, I'm vegan. What does that mean? It means I'm doing my best. And if someone says you're not doing your best and here's why, thank you. That's a learning experience. Teach me. And I'll keep on, like you said, you would disagree with me here about adding things and learning more. I think that is the best thing, actually. I think it's great that we have so many different people in our movement and are vegan that have so many different opinions and so many different points to make. And actually that, I think you mentioned in your talk that a lot of people disagree on the definition and disagree that what it means. I see that as a strength because we're not a cult. This isn't a cult. We don't all believe the same thing. Some of us believe something different. Some of us are from South America and have a completely different perspective on what this means. Some of us would live in India and have a different perspective. So I don't see that as a negative point at all. I think that's a strength that we have such a diverse community with so many opinions and so many views on what it means to be vegan, and we learn from each other. And I think as long as somebody doesn't have a view that is oppressive to the animals, then, and that's also to be debated, of course, but I think it is a beautiful thing that we have these debates. I think it's great, rather than being a cult where we all just, pray to Earthling Ed and whatever he says is gospel. You know what I mean? So I do think that's a good thing. Yeah. Do we have to stop now? Are we being told to stop? I saw someone post about Q&A.
I think, Cheyenne, if people have questions.
Yeah, we do have quite a few questions that people are eager to ask, but if you wanted to talk a little bit more, I think that's okay.
Yeah, maybe we can give like each like a short closing summary, and then we can move into questions.
Sounds good. And just for anybody who wants to ask a question, ideally you would click the raise your hand button because it's a lot easier for me to keep track like that. Otherwise, if you post something in the comments or in the chat, like it just gets completely lost because there's a lot of comments coming through. Thanks.
Yeah.
I guess I can start with my summary, I guess, that I think that using the word vegan, promoting this idea of veganism puts too much value on individual change and thinking that this is where we should be putting most of our efforts and this is how we're going to achieve liberation. And once you are vegan, you're a good person living in line with your values and you can judge everyone else. And I think that mentality keeps people away from our movement, makes it unclear that we're talking about justice when we're not there to explain what we actually mean. So I think instead of focusing on this purity of converting individuals, I think we should focus on things that people already agree with, like banning fur, banning castration, banning horse carriages, like things like that, and say everyone's on board, let's win these campaigns, let's start stretching those political muscles. And when you have this vegan word, it creates this identity that separates us from everyone else and says, I am living in line with my value, I'm ethical, you're not. I think that creates separation with the rest of people who actually do care about animals. But when we put ourselves on this pedestal, we're pushing them away and we're not building the coalition and the systemic change that we need to happen. So that's my argument in a nutshell. Veganism is human-centered and it alienates people and it's misunderstood. That's it in a nutshell.
Okay, cool. So from my side, I think that veganism, the idea of veganism and the concept definitely has its limitations and has its problems, but I don't feel that these problems, these limitations are enough of a convincing argument to get rid of the word. I feel like the word has been built up over such a long time. It has finally reached mainstream. It's on the TV. People are being invited on TV to talk about it. We've got very, very, very influential, famous people like, for example, Lewis Hamilton, who has gone vegan. He's promoting the word. He's also promoting animal rights. I feel like this is the moment in time, especially now, where this is the worst time, in my opinion, to start to try to drop something that we have successfully built over a very, very long time and is finally reaching people. And from a marketing standpoint, I think it's to do away with it would be kind of like impractical and ineffective. I feel that, just to, I guess, close on one more just little point, it's about, I think that as activists, we have to be concerned, we have to be careful, because we are radical. Like being vegan, even though it is mainstream to an extent, it is still a radical move. And I think a lot of us forget that it is radical. To be vegan, to say no to all of this exploitation, to go against what is socially normal, to go against what everybody else is paying for, it is a radical move. And I know we say like, no, it's not radical, it's not extreme. Look, it is a radical move for someone to do that. And I know that when we start to become more and more experienced and more knowledgeable, we look for the next radical move, because this is not radical for us anymore. And that's what I feel we have to be careful of when we look at ideas such as post-veganism, that are we just looking for the next big radical thing? Or is this actually the best thing for the movement right now? And in this case, I think, you decide for yourself. For me, I believe that this looks to me like it's a very, it's the next radical step. It's like we had the raw vegans for a while. They were claiming that they were one up from veganism. And now I feel like, yeah, exactly. And now I feel like this thing, I feel like not you, Orlando, but I feel like a lot of people that are jumping onto this idea, they're doing it because, oh, this is the next big radical step. And if you're going to do this, go for it. I can't tell you what to do or what not to do, but please do it for the right reasons. If you agree with what Orlando's saying and you think this is why to do it, then do it. But if you're doing it just because it's the biggest next radical thing, don't do that, because this is creating more purity. This is creating more purity problems within the movement if you're, creating a different category of person to label yourself with. I'm sorry, I've gone on for a long time, but just one linking to that point, that final point. If you're doing this because you don't want people to dislike you and you want to be more accepted, let me tell you something. Not you, but like in general, if that's why you're doing this, because vegans are getting bad names and they don't like vegans. Saying to somebody, I'm vegan, versus saying to somebody, I'm not vegan, but I do eat vegan food because I feel like I don't identify as a vegan though, because I don't want to, it's not productive, or I don't feel it's effective. Tell me, like, which one of those sounds more pretentious than the other? And for me, it's definitely the second one. If somebody tells me I am eating plant-based, I am against animal exploitation, but I don't identify as a vegan because I feel like it's, unproductive or whatever, I would find that person to be quite pretentious. So if it is about, you know, powerful messaging, or if it is about how we're viewed, then I think that's really important to consider. Like, how are you going to frame this so it doesn't sound pretentious? So that's it basically. I just want the best for everyone, especially the animals, and whatever you decide to do, just do it well. Do it good. Yeah.
So I feel like David had a little bit more time to
I did, yeah.
statement. So if Orlando, if you want to throw anything else in there, you have the opportunity to do that here. And then, yeah, we can get into the questions.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, Matt, if you want to.
Yeah. Oh, no problem. No problem at all. No problem. Yeah, I don't think like we're gonna be more liked by this. Can you still hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. I think I've faced the most bullying I've ever had in my life once I came out with this. Vegans are vicious. Vegans are vicious, and they've been coming after me, and they've unfriended me. So don't ever think that you're gonna be more liked, because vegans can be very like bullies, more than I ever was by non-vegans. But just,
yeah, definitely.
like, I want to see if we agree with this. Like, David, do you think like a headline that doesn't mention the word vegan, like I said, people are not there to interpret what that means. Do you think a headline that doesn't mention vegan and instead mention animals, do you think like an animal headline is better than like ones that mention the words vegan in the headline?
I think it depends on who's receiving the message in a strange way. Like, if this is going to go out, so for example, if this is going to go out to a predominantly like, I don't know, like a university paper, right? Let's imagine it's a university or college paper. Then I think, yeah, anti-speciesism or animal rights would be more attractive, because these are individuals who are studying, and maybe some of them are, well, a lot of them are very politically minded. If this article is going to go out to your average person who's on their way to work, you know, I don't know, just like, it could be, I don't know, let's say like somebody who's a laborer, let's say builder, and they just open the paper and they see a headline. In that sense, I think maybe the word vegan is going to be more attractive, because it's something they've seen in the supermarket a million times. It's something they've seen at McDonald's now. And it's something, oh, what is that actually? I've seen that everywhere. So I think it totally depends on the audience, actually. I think, yeah, it would vary.
Okay. Yeah. I think we disagree on that, but let's give it to Cheyenne. Maybe we can touch back on it. Depends on what people are interested in.
Okay, first up we have Brian Austin. I don't know if that means he's from Austin, but we have Brian. So I'm going to go ahead. Oh, yeah. There you go.
Hi. Okay, so first you guys touched on the bailout stuff, and I just wanted to clarify that the bailouts were from oversupply of farmers making more than the market needed, and then the trade fumbles with President Trump. It's not like 5% of our population boycotting animals' bodies led to the economic pressure that needed a bailout. So I just wanted to clarify that off the bat. And then we talked about like individual versus systemic change, and I think a lot of time we push the individual change before getting them to join our movement. And I was thinking like, well, shouldn't that be what we are asking of people first and foremost, so they have a support network to draw from, and then make that individual change over time? But also I wanted to touch on like, I guess let's get to my real question is, isn't it the least we can do is ask someone for like a signature on a petition or a donation to our network, rather than asking them to change their whole lifestyle? And another question I have is, who do you think is helping animals more? An activist that is also an animal eater, or a vegan that sits at home and just buys plant-based products?
I think you're gonna need to like put those messages in a. I should have written all of those down, man. I don't know, Orlando, do you want to go first? And then I can just write the messages, write the questions down as you go.
Yeah, I think. Yeah. Let's try to keep the messages, the questions a little short, so we can try to get through a lot of them. With respect to your last question, which is the last one I remember, I think it depends. It's like a vegan who's pure and just stays at home versus somebody who eats animals and it's an activist, I think it depends. And I don't think one is necessarily more helpful to animals than the other. For example, you can have somebody that's a journalist that writes a lot of articles about factory farming, and they eat backyard eggs that they have, right? And they get all this press out exposing people to the idea of factory farming, yet they eat backyard eggs. So in theory, they're not vegan, but they could be helping more animals than somebody who is just buying vegan products and doesn't do any activism at home. So I think it depends. I don't think vegans are necessarily doing more than people eating animals who are activists, but I think it depends. And if David wants to take the other question, which I don't remember right now.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's just go one by one, maybe.
My central other question was, a lot of the times we say like, being vegan is the least you can do. And I think that's wrong, because being vegan is a huge lifestyle change. And I think if someone like doesn't want to, you know, be involved in our whole movement or whatever, like the least we can ask them to do if they care is to give us money, or ask them to give us their personal information to support our campaign. Say like, hey, sign this petition to ban factory farms or whatnot, you know?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think when people say that, like the least we can do, I don't think they're talking about the least we can do specifically like, oh, you as an action, what is the easiest action you can do? I think what they mean is in regards to the animals, what is the least you can do for the animals? You can at least stop paying for what's happening to them. Like if you actually care about them, you know, I think that's what people mean when they say that. Like, I mean, it's kind of like, if you're not going to actively help them, could you at least stop contributing to it? Like, I think that's kind of the message, rather than like, you know, like signing a petition is the least you can do, because that's not the least, because you're still harming them. Like the first step is to stop harming them. Sign a petition as well. That's great. But I mean, could you also stop harming them? Like, you know what I mean? I don't know if to apply that logic to another example, like if there was, I don't know, if there was literally an animal right there, and somebody else was harming them and you didn't want to stop it, the least you could do was not join in, right? The least you could do was not contribute and join in with that person kicking that animal or whatever. So, okay, that's good, but it is not an action, like, but it's the least you could do. Like, it's an inaction that the least you could do is not contribute. I think that's what I understand it as. Anyway.
Yeah, I think it's tricky because, like, in one sense, like, veganism is like not contributing, right? It's like not putting support. But then on the other hand, you're like, okay, if I'm removing my support, but this person's going to keep kicking them, maybe if I sign a petition that passes a law that then stops this person from kicking them, you know, like, maybe, but I think, it's tricky, right?
But if you do that, if you sign that petition whilst kicking them,
No. I guess, well, you're paying the person. You're not kicking them. You're giving money to the person. So again, with the directness thing, but I don't know if we can get out of this, or if Cheyenne wants to go on with another question, I'll let her decide.
Sure.
Yeah, I think maybe it will go on a bit of a tangent. But it's difficult to not like dive in depth with all of these questions, but we do have quite a few. And just a reminder for those who will be asking questions to please keep them as questions, and for the sake of David and Orlando to be able to answer them, one question at a time is preferable, and one question per person is also preferable because we have quite a few people who want to ask questions. So next we have Shannon, who I will, there you go, cool. She's unmuted.
Hi. Thank you guys for doing this, by the way. I take a lot from the discussion on framing, but Orlando, because so many people here have seen your presentations in the past, I would like you to please address and talk about the Google search no longer being accurate, and also if we could talk about the framing of why are vegans so being a bit manipulative.
I guess when I did that video, I looked up on Google, why are vegans so, and it was to show that my perception, that is that most vegans are disliked by the majority of the public, and it's because of the framing, because when they hear vegan, they think it's a diet, and then they're confused as to why we're pushing a diet. David thinks that people actually understand that it's about animals and not about diet. I'm not sure if we can agree on that, whether veganism is seen as a diet or not. But I think it's mostly seen as a diet for most people. So I was just, I put that Google search, why are vegans so, as a way to show what I believe is the truth, is that most people dislike vegans. And like the Google search was one thing. There was this other study with 500 people. And I think like in general, we vegans, I think we know that most vegans are disliked. But yeah, if one piece of evidence doesn't convince you and you think that most vegans are liked, then we're gonna need more data. For sure, we can use more data. I just think in general, vegans are disliked. And I think it's because they think it's a consumer diet change. Vegans are liked, or maybe he thinks that most vegans are getting through on the animal message and not a diet message. But I think most people think it's a diet, but I don't know what David has to say.
Yeah, I think most people think it's a diet, but I think when they see marches and they see protests, I think they know damn well it's not about the food. I think they know it's about the animals, and that's when they start to be intellectually dishonest and they say, look at those vegans marching for their diet. I think they know damn well that march has nothing to do with the diet. It is all about the animals. I think that's the moment where they realize. I think when it comes up in other ways, for sure they think it's a diet, like because most of the articles and the publications in the media talk about health. So of course they think it's a diet at that point. But if that article is talking about ethics, there's no doubt that people realize like, okay, this is not about food, it's about animals. They just purposefully misunderstand it. About the Google search, actually, I did a quick search, not on why are vegans so, but actually I did a search on why are people so. And if any of you want to go and do that, why are people so? It's 100% negative. Why are people so mean? Why are people so cruel? Why are people so jealous? Why are people so? So I think this Google search thing, although interesting, I think it's important that people aren't hated in general, but by Google search, you would think they were. And actually, if you put why are women so and why are black people so, it doesn't even give you results because Google knows that what's going to come up. So that actually stops the results from coming up because it's going to be racist and sexist. So I think we have to, yeah, I mean, it was interesting. It's a fun thing to try, but I don't think it's like a fair representation of like how the term is being seen by people. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're right. And when I did that search recently, the results were changed and some were not as bad, like Shannon said. But in general, do you think that most people like vegans, or do you think most people dislike vegans? Like that's my general point, regardless of this Google search.
For sure, I think most people dislike other people that make them feel inadequate, and if that means that if it's in this case it's a vegan, then yeah, they also dislike climate protesters because I don't fly anymore. They dislike that because they still fly. They dislike feminists, especially if they are not a feminist, right? Or if the feminists are saying something that somehow impedes on their life. Like, for example, one of the studies you showed about vegans being disliked, it showed that also there was one more fact in that study that I think you missed or didn't, whatever, you didn't include it, but it said that actually the majority of the people that disliked vegans were right-wing people because, and they specifically said, because the vegan idea impedes on what they want, because right-wingers are conservative and veganism is not conservative. Obviously, veganism is progressive. So of course they don't like the idea of animal liberation, of animal rights, because none of these things fit in with what they want to do, which is eat meat, drink milk. That's conservative, traditional values, right? So in that study, of course, those people aren't gonna like us. And a lot of people don't like it because it challenges them on a moral level, and they don't like that. Whatever the moral is, like it could be, this case, it's non-human animals. In another case, it could be with women. In another case, black people, whatever. People don't like it if they feel that somebody else has better morals than them. So I don't feel like it's down to a word. I just think it's down to morals, to be honest.
Cool. Are we ready to go on to the next person, or was there still questions?
Yes.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Okay, so next we have Mariana. You're now unmuted.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
So my question is, I'm sorry if anyone has covered this, I'm not sure. It's a very practical question for Orlando. For example, I have been listening about this, about the vegan word and everything, and I have removed it from my Instagram bio because I thought it was the best thing to do. And what I've been struggling with is when I'm, for example, having a meal with a group of people and someone asks like, why am I having a vegan meal? And I don't want to say because I'm a vegan, I want to use another expression, and I really struggle to find what expression to use because I feel like if I say I'm an animal rights activist, people will ask, oh, so you're a vegan? This happens. Or if I say no because I respect animals and I don't want to eat them, and people will still ask, is it because you're a vegan? What do I answer to that? What is the best way to describe myself in these social situations?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that since this is such a new idea, like I'm not gonna have the best answers for you. Like we're still trying to figure this out as a movement. How should we frame it instead, right? So when people ask me, like, why don't you want to eat this burger? I feel like what appears easy and simple is to say, no, I'm vegan. But I think a lot of conversations end there and we leave the animals out. And people are like, okay, you're vegan, keep moving, right? So I feel like if we don't use the word vegan, we're forced to talk about animals instead. So yeah, if you can't use the word vegan, they ask you why you don't want to eat this, you'll have to say, because I don't want to support animal abuse, or because I don't want to eat animals, or whatever, I don't want to be a participant in injustice. I feel like when you don't use the word vegan, you're forced to center animals again. And vegans will say, well, yeah, but I say why I'm vegan and I explain it, but it's not always easy to explain it. So I think it's better to talk about the victims when we're asked. And then I normally say something like, I used to identify as vegan, but now I think that identity is actually counterproductive because it makes people feel that they're better than the other. So I just want to work with you and find things that we both agree on and help us achieve justice for all animals. But I don't identify with that word because I don't want to assume that I'm better than you. I want to work with you. So of course that's a little longer and seems messier, but like I said, we're still trying to figure it out. And veganism just seems simpler, but I don't think it's that simple because, again, I think most people think that it's a diet unless you have the time to explain it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question.
Okay, the next one is Jonathan Moore, and I'll unmute you now.
Hi, this one's for David. So I would like to start off by saying that I really like all your work you do with Socratic method. And so I have a question regarding an outreach conversation I had once. So I was having this conversation with this lady and she wasn't really receptive, so I always like to get to, well, what do you think we should do about this, right? So she kind of like started thinking like, I don't know, maybe not eating animals or something like that. But she had this concern like, well, but I'm just one person. This isn't really going to do anything, right? And so I tried something new. I agreed with her. Like, yeah, like you are just one person. It's not really going to do anything. And like, as a result, she started like wondering, she suddenly became a lot more receptive to talking about like activism, right? Of course, when it started talking about activism, like the groups to join were like No Protect because vegan activist and vegan activist worldwide. So I was kind of like, oof. But anyways, my question is, suppose like this is a question for both speakers, and I kind of want to get both your opinions on it. So like hypothetically, let's imagine that somehow we get 70 up purchasing animal. What percentage of this group do you reckon would support a ban on slaughterhouses and everything. Like, that's what we want, really. And conversely, what percentage of people who do not boycott products would still be willing to support such a ban?
Okay. I think I missed half of the message because the connection went a bit funny, but I guess how many people did you say? A group of what? I missed the first part of it when you said, imagine we have a group, and then it cut out for a second. What was it you said?
Oh, yeah. So let's like imagine that somehow we get 70% of the population to boycott animal products, right? What percentage of these would you reckon would support an abolition, like not use the personal choice, but support abolition? And conversely, could we get people who maybe couldn't boycott who would support a ban?
Okay, I think I got the question. I think my connection's bad, but I got it pretty much. So yeah, I think I'm with Orlando on this one. I think most people, without considering the consequences of doing this, would support a ban on factory farms. But if they knew that that would make their meat and products more expensive, they wouldn't support the ban. So I think it's about clever messaging from us. Like most people you would meet in the street would say, yeah, I'm totally against those farms. Oh, those farms have seen on TV? No, I'm totally against them. Great, yeah, sign this petition. But if we follow that up with, hey, by the way, if they do ban these farms, the price of meat will go up 2 times. They're not signing that petition, right? This is the point. They're going, oh, really? Oh, okay, maybe we should keep factory farms. So that's where I think it depends on the message we send. And I think that's why we need both messages. We need one message that says, hey, look, this is immoral. Look what we're doing to them. Followed up with another message that says, hey, do you want to help us try and ban the worst of this? It'll make it more expensive, and then other people won't be able to afford it. And you don't want it anyway, right? You don't want it anymore. So it's a win-win. I feel like it has to have a complete message to make this all successful. Otherwise, when it starts to get banned and people realize they have to pay more money, well, we might see a little bit of a the situation might go the opposite direction. It might say, people will actually say, okay, no, bring them back. We want cheap animal products. So that's my concern with it. Feels like an incomplete approach if we're just saying sign the petition and get them banned without actually getting people to not want those products anymore. I feel like we need a complete approach. We need everything. Yeah.
Orlando, did you want to?
Just quickly, I agree 100%. Yeah, I agree 100% with that. I just say we can do that without using this divisive word. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, next we have Alicia or Alicia. Sorry if I'm saying your name wrong. I've just unmuted you.
I just want to make the question, because David said that in India it's sometimes easy to talk about veganism because the cheap food is usually vegan food, so rice and beans and stuff like that. But my concern is, don't you think that because these people are not vegan, they eat plant-based kind of forced because this is what they can afford, that when the economy improves in these countries, that the animal products demand will increase because it's like kind of a status symbol?
100% yes, and it's already happening. It's already happening here in India. The meat consumption's increasing year on year, and yeah, it's really quite sad that people associate wealth with animal products, which is quite ironic considering what we discussed earlier was that veganism is elitist, but then actually in countries like India, eating animal products is elitist. So it's, or not always, of course, but like it is becoming more like that. Like if you can afford the Western diet, then you must have a lot of money. So it's a status symbol, you're right. So I wasn't by any means saying that the vegan message or anti-speciesist message, I wasn't saying that India doesn't need it. It absolutely needs it, not just for that reason, but obviously the dairy industry here is one of the biggest in the world. The leather and beef industry is one of the biggest in the world. They export it. They're one of the biggest exporters on the planet of leather and beef. So the message is absolutely needed here for those reasons, but obviously for the one you've just said, because yeah, as people are gaining more and more money and as the country is developing, yes, they're eating more and more animal products, which is really, really heartbreaking. Yeah.
Yeah, just pretty much my same message as before. Yeah, we definitely need to tell people to get on board, but I think we can do that by saying, you know, you, the non-vegan, you are not the enemy. The system is the enemy that makes it difficult for you to be vegan, right? So like, you are my ally, the non-vegan, you are my ally. Let's work together and change the system that's corrupt, that's harming animals. So I'd rather build the bridge with that person and attack the system together than tell them you are the enemy. So that's why I think, yeah, not using that separating word, but saying, you know, I know you're against animal cruelty. I know you haven't changed. Let's find ways to work together and start banning things that we both agree with.
Thank you. And then next we have Caro. Caro?
Hi, thank you all. Thank you both for the great well discussion and also in the chats. It's interesting to read. I just want to sort of introduce the question, I think. When I became vegan, I didn't even know about anti-speciesism or animal rights, not really. Only when I started having conversations. I started reading more, but still I never really used it in my conversations with people. And I also find this, the other people who do outreaching, we never use anti-speciesism or animal rights. And even, I think this is just my assumption also because I don't know exactly what would animal rights actually look like. And talking about veganism really prevents us from exploring the concept of animal rights, but also anti-speciesist society. And this is why I really agree with Orlando as well. But I wonder if what both of your thoughts are on this, also these two other concepts, that is also just still very superficial, and like what a post-veganism society would look like, but yeah.
Orlando, do you want to speak on that first?
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble understanding what the specific question is. Maybe David got it and can respond, or Cheyenne, or
yeah, I think I got it. I mean, I think it might be, I might be able to go ahead and then you can comment after. I mean, regarding speciesism and animal rights, like what people not using them in outreach, I can understand people avoiding them because, you know, people, I mean, animal rights, if you're talking about, you know, the bad impact or the bad marketing or whatever, animal rights has a really, really bad name. Like, people associate animal rights activists with terrorists. You know, you got to look at the UK and the ALF. They are animal rights activists. They're the Animal Liberation Front. They are literally the definition of what animal rights was not so long ago. And I think people still have that in their mind, that animal rights activists are, you know, criminals, right? So I see why some people would avoid animal rights. To talk about anti-speciesism or speciesism, I personally would avoid that with anyone that I feel is not on that, in that mindset, the same mindset. So for example, it depends on the person. So if I'm speaking to somebody who is quite clearly somebody who is interested in like political ideas, maybe they've talked about feminism a little bit, maybe they've talked about human rights, then of course I'm going to talk about speciesism because that's something that they're definitely on board with. But if there's somebody that stood in front of me that's just like, hey, look, it's bad, but like, come on, I've got to work, you know, I've got kids, like, I'm not going to start talking to them about speciesism because it's not going to appeal to them. But the word vegan, they know the word vegan. They see the word vegan. This is something that even if they have no interest in animals, they've seen it at the supermarket. So it's something that's familiar and it helps. So they're the reasons that I would say some people don't talk about these things. And also because, like you said, they don't know about them. I think that is a problem. But I don't think that is a problem with veganism. I think that is just a problem with people not researching this movement and you know, these things. And I only learned about speciesism like after quite a long time of being vegan. Again, I don't think that that's an argument to not use the word. I think it's a tool. It's just a tool in our toolbox. If you don't want to talk about veganism with somebody, all right, talk about something else. But to say don't use it when somebody would clearly be more receptive to it, when some paper or some article would clearly benefit from using the word, don't use it just because of these ideas that it might not be so good. I feel like it's cutting it out for not a good enough reason. I think it's very useful sometimes to use the word vegan instead of animal rights or speciesism, for example. So yeah.
Orlando, did you want her to repeat the question, or do you think you have a handle on it?
I think I understand now based on David's answer. I would just say that, yeah, maybe I agree with David. Maybe animal rights is also very disliked in some places. So I would say, okay, then let's not use that either. And let's talk about, get a bunch of students together or get a bunch of scientists together and be like, scientists are protecting Cargill because they are doing so, and or a group of citizens led by students or led by scientists. Like, I'm not wedded to any wording. I just think we should be adapting our wording as necessary, as seems effective, depending on how the public is reacting to it. So I would say, let's do focus groups, let's do interviews, and change our language as necessary. And maybe, yeah, I think this is a big point that we disagree. I feel like it's mostly disliked. Like David said, they've seen the word in the supermarket, so they already associated with food consumption, diet. So I would just say maybe animal rights isn't the right thing. Obviously, post-veganism is not, and I'm not saying that we should ever use that. This is just like for us to think about these topics. But I'm just saying we should keep adapting and changing words as necessary, depending on how many people we can get on board with those words.
Great. Cara, did you feel like that was an answer to your question?
Yeah, and also, like, with the animal rights I meant, I actually also don't know what are animal rights, how would it look like in practice. We should also explore this as well. Like, it's not being talked about now, really. It's just this word, the two words together, but what actually is it, which rights are this, and how should this be in the law? All of this, I think it's important to also talk about that under among activists. This is also what I meant with that.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's why we started this campaign for an animal bill of rights for Rose's law, because we haven't gotten political yet. And we said, okay, these serve, you can political. So I agree with you that we need to start doing that work, which is why I think focusing on consumption that much is a detriment. And then that's why I think we should focus more on political and rights and all those sort of things.
Okay, are we ready to move on to the next question? Okay, next we have Douglas McCaffrey, and you are now unmuted.
Hello. My question is about, where do you guys think the definition and rules around veganism come from? Orlando, you mentioned earlier that somebody who relies on food banks for their food could still consider themselves vegan, even if they were eating animal products, because it's as far as practicable possible. So I was wondering, like, where do you think the rules around it come from, and why, does that cause so much trouble then in fighting around who is a vegan and who is?
Yeah, I think for me, the practical. Oh, sorry.
Okay, that's okay. Go ahead, man. It's okay. I'm delayed. Okay. It's okay.
Yeah, I think for me, the practical and possible part are the major weakness of the definition, because it requires us to be constantly having these debates. Is that practicable? Is that not? And that's one of the main issues, is that you have these debates on Facebook where vegans spend so much energy on the Impossible Burger. Is it vegan? Is it not? And I think that's just not helpful to animals, because we miss the bigger picture and we get caught up on what's practicable, what's possible. So I think the definition of what vegan means is what the majority of vegans think it means. It's like, if 95% of people say that palm oil is not vegan, then all of a sudden it's not. But when it's things that we're split on, like feeding your cat the bodies of other animals, then it's like, well, it depends. So I feel like because of this practical and possible part, we spend way too much time having to debate what's vegan and what's not. So I just think it's rather not go into that debate and instead talk about how to change the system. So that's my answer. It's that it's not clear and waste too much time debating it.
Yeah, I would say that the definition of it, obviously, it came from a very long time ago, and it is a vague definition for sure, and it's a definition that has expanded, and definitions change, words change. This is life. This is what happens. Dictionary definitions are. There's even a fallacy appeal to dictionary. Like they're not. Dictionary definitions don't accurately reflect modern day living. Our words have changed from 40, 50 years ago. So the definition of veganism has also adapted and evolved and changed and is continuing to evolve and change. I don't see that as a bad thing. As I've said, I don't see that as a reason to stop using it. I like the fact that we have not Facebook debates. Facebook debates, these Facebook groups are poisonous places. They're really not nice. That I do not agree with those. I feel like if people do what we're doing, I feel like this is great. And I feel like within the animal rights, vegan movement, whatever you want to call it, I love the fact that so many people have so many different views and opinions. And as long as it's dealt with in a constructive and productive way, I feel like that is our strength, that people call us a cult and we can say, no, we're not, because we don't agree with each other on things. A cult always agrees on everything, and we're not a cult. We're a group of people. We all want to save animals from being exploited. And we've all got completely different ideas on what this means and what it means to be vegan and what it means to be active and what it means to, and I don't think that is bad. I just wish people would stop hating each other for differences of opinion. That's the thing I think is bad. And I think that's not a vegan problem. That's a people problem. People are shit. Unfortunately.
Okay, great. Let's move on to Brian. And just before you ask your question, I've just opened up the chat for anyone who would like to ask a question but doesn't want to go on the microphone. So if everyone else can actually leave space in the chat for those questions to come in without getting lost, that would be great. And go ahead, Brian.
Right. So I think both of you agreed that we need to focus on the systemic change. And usually what I find whenever I go to meetups or things like that, the first question people ask is, how long have you been vegan? And it's like almost like a pissing contest of like, oh, well, I've been vegan 20 years or I've been vegan 8 years or whatever. But I feel like I don't even want to answer that question anymore because it doesn't matter. But I want to take that and shift that towards like, I've been an activist for 3 years, that's what I want to take my pride in doing. And so like, shouldn't our focus be our call to action if we can get people to agree with us, for them to join our movement and to support the systemic change as an activist over their individual change first.
I'll go first if you want, and you can finish. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good point. I think this whole idea of like, how long have you been vegan? I also don't like the question, where are you from? I don't like these questions. I feel like they're arbitrary questions and they're just baseline questions. Like they're just, I don't like them. I don't like them at all. I don't like people asking me where you're from. I don't like people asking me how long have you been vegan, because I feel like they're just the things they think they should ask. What I want to get into is the important stuff, just like you said. How long have you been an activist? What, you're not an activist? Oh, cool. Like, tell me how I can help you be an activist. That's the bit that I want to get to. I want to find out if they're vegan, obviously. I want to know. But more importantly for me is like, not more importantly, after that, I'm not interested in how long they've been vegan. I'm interested in like, are you vegan? Yeah, cool. And then now I want to know if they're an activist. And if they are, I want to know what they've been doing. Because that's the bit that I agree with you. That's the important bit. It's that, like, okay, well, inspire me, because I'm an activist too. Let's do this, So that's where I'm at. I think that you're right. I think that should be a focus, but I don't think that should come at the expense of somebody's of somebody's let's say veganism. I don't think it should be one or the other. It shouldn't be like, oh, I don't care if you're vegan or not. Tell me about the action you've done. I think it still should be like, you know, I want to know if you're a vegan, and if you're not, I want to try and find out why before I start talking about the activism, really. Because I've met activists who are not vegan, and frankly, like, it's disappointing. Like, I can't help it. I'm disappointed that you're out here on the street with me, but you're paying for the injustice. Like, it's not nice. Like, I don't think this is good, and I don't think you're giving a good message to other people either. So that's where I'm focusing on at first. But if they are vegan, I just bypass the rest of it. I'm not interested in how long they've been vegan for, you know?
Right.
So I agree with you. In short, I agree with you. Yeah.
Right. So I'm just saying, like, at the end of our outreach conversations, whenever we change people's beliefs that animals aren't for our use, we should say, like, okay, well, would you like to join my activism group? Here's how you can help, you know, put an end to this problem, instead of just go vegan and change your lifestyle, you know?
For sure. I think you've got a point. I think that it's always good to mention, like, I definitely agree with you, and I've tried this a few times, been like, so, you know, now that here's what you can do, you can change your life, and then you can come out and stand out here with us and do this with us. Because as I said earlier, I understand the attraction of having more people at a protest or more people standing by our side, but I don't find it attractive or effective to have people stood by my side that are still contributing to what we're fighting for. Just the same way I don't think misogynists are welcome in feminist marches, or that racists are welcome at Black Lives Matter, and unless they want to change. That's the important bit, right? If it's a racist who wants to learn how to not be racist, then that's great. If it's a misogynist who wants to learn how to respect women, great, please come. But if they're not interested in doing that, like somebody who is like, I don't want to change, but I'll fight for the animals, then I don't see that as good at all. I don't see that as an effective message.
Orlando?
Yeah, so yeah, I totally agree that, yeah, I don't think we should be asking that question to people who come in, asking them how long they've been vegan. I think where I differ with David is, like, I don't want to know if they're vegan or not. I do not ask them. I just want them to keep coming back, and I really do not care about their personal choices. And I know that if they keep coming back, they'll eventually educate themselves. So I just try to be really, really welcoming, and I don't care if they identify as vegan or not, or what their consumption is. To me, it's about getting them active. So I wouldn't ask them. And, like, I myself, like, I'm somebody who spends the majority of my time doing activism, and I'm not vegan. And when I first used to say this, people were like, oh yeah, you're still vegan, you're still vegan. So what I had to do was I had to drink non-vegan wine. So I can tell people, look, I'm not vegan, stop calling me vegan. Do you want to kick me out of the movement because I drink this wine? And I'm not drinking the wine because I like this. I'm drinking the wine because I don't want to be called vegan. I don't want to say 100 vegans march into a store and I can raise my hand and I say, no, I'm not vegan. Because when I said I'm not vegan before, the vegans didn't want to let me leave. And they were like, yes, you're still vegan. So I'm definitely not vegan. And I drink the wine just so I can't be called vegan, because I think it's that important for me not to identify as a vegan. But of course, everyone can make their decision about how much in line they want to live with their values. But I think I'm causing a lot more harm by my flying than my wine consumption. But it was just a way for me to say, don't exclude vegans, because if you want to exclude vegans, you need to kick me out of the movement as well.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Jonathan Moore, and then we'll take some questions from the chats.
So I'm hoping my connection works this time, but in the queer liberation movement, there's this idea of allyship is not a noun, it's more of a verb, it's more of an action, because what happens is sometimes people like start identifying as an ally, and as a result, whenever they're confronted with something, they'll tend to, they're more likely to shut it down as opposed to want to listen and want to be not, since like I don't think anyone is non-racist, but they're anti-racist, so they combat racism.
I think you should turn your video off, because it's kind of laggy.
Okay.
I think that'll make it better if you turn your video off. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. Okay. So like, it's like the idea that people aren't non-racist, but they can't be anti-racist. People aren't non-sexist, but they can't be anti-sexist, and they can confront racism within themselves. So my question is, within the animal rights movement, if we're trying to tell people, follow our arbitrary line, eating animals is bad, but if you have to use tires that aren't vegan, it's not that big of a deal. On what grounds, to the regular person, is that better than free range is okay, but factory farm is bad? Since that happens a lot in the queer movement, where people will say, well, this isn't as bad, so I'm not going to really think about it. So yeah, that's my question. I hope that's clear.
I mean, I think the idea of, okay, we're all harming animals, so let's go out of our way to harm animals is that's maddening to me. It's I can't imagine a more dangerous ideology of, okay, we're all doing bad, so let's stop trying to do bad and let's just keep doing bad and tell everybody else to keep doing bad because we can't stop it. So let's just keep doing it regardless of how extreme or in extreme it is. It stands to reason, it stands to common sense that there are levels, there is a hierarchy of oppression, there's a hierarchy of exploitation, and there are things that are far more damaging than other things, as Orlando's rightly said. And of course, I would encourage anyone to go out of their way to try to not buy those bike tires. I don't see anything wrong with telling someone, I didn't even know bike tires couldn't be vegan. If I had a bike, I would definitely consider that, and I think that the idea, like I said, the idea of just because we can't get rid of all of these things doesn't mean that we should include things. And Orlando, on a personal note, man, I'm so surprised to hear that you said that thing about the wine, because for me, that's it's not I don't think you're a monster or something. Don't think I'm going down that road. I'm not. But my point is, it's to say that just because we can't avoid all of it, I'm going to go out of my way to do some of it on purpose. I just find that it's is there not some kind of, has it not gone too far? Has it not gone too far trying to prove that I'm not a vegan? I'm going to go so far as to do something that is against my values just to get rid of this title. I mean, is this not distracting from the animals more than veganism itself? In your eyes?
Right. I mean, I was already doing many things that went against my values and that caused a lot more harm to animals. That's my point. I was already doing those things and causing harm to animals, but because the vegans had decided that that was okay, I was on this pedestal thinking I'm better than everyone else. So it just came to the realization that I'm already harming animals, and I totally agree with you. It doesn't mean that we should go out there and actively harm animals. Definitely not. We should definitely do the best that we can, but I feel like the obsession with this black and white identity of I'm over here, I made it, I'm vegan, and you're over there, you're still harming animals. I think that is a huge issue that keeps people away from our movement, right? So harming an animal directly, obviously it's terrible, right? But then it depends on how far you remove yourself. At some point, wine was considered okay, and flying was considered as worse. But right now in the vegan movement, I would argue that flying is considered as more ethical. Flying is considered more ethical than drinking non-vegan wine. And I think that's just ridiculousness from the vegan movement, because flying is causing so much more harm than drinking that wine. Talking about directness, right? And talking about the resulting victims, that I think that inconsistency in between those two, that's what's harmful, because one is a lot more damaging, flying, than wine. And pointing fingers at people and saying, I don't want you in the movement, I don't respect you because you did this one thing, when I'm doing this much harmful thing, I think it's inconsistent. And I think that's one of the most damaging parts to our movement, that inconsistency pushes people away because they can see that we're hypocritical in many ways.
Sure. So just before we move on, I just want to just get something like clear in my mind here. Like I see like flying for some people, flying for, or by riding a bike for some people. These are things that are very practical and necessary things for a lot of people. But like comparing that to going out of one's way to drink a wine, knowing that it's not vegan for the sake of proving that I'm not vegan, how can those two things ever be comparable as things? Like, I cannot see that. And we keep talking about purity and we keep talking about perfection and how division and vegan is divisive. But like, is that not what's happening right now? If somebody is going to such an extent that they will drink something that proves that they're not vegan to show that they're not vegan, is that not purity in itself? Is that not trying to show people like, I'm not like you, and therefore causing a division? I'm not a vegan, don't call me vegan. Or I am a vegan, call me vegan. You're not a vegan, you know, don't call yourself a vegan. Is this not another divisiveness? Is this not an extra category of purity? Like, I'm not a vegan, don't call me a vegan. Like, you get what I mean? Are we not adding another category to this situation?
I just want to clarify what I was trying to ask. What I was meaning to ask is, in people's minds, on what grounds is our arbitrary line better than theirs? So people might try their arbitrary line that free range is okay, but factory farm is bad. Or maybe they draw their line higher than ours. Like maybe you know, shopping at Amazon is not okay, and if you shop at Amazon, you're an exploiter, right? So in people's minds, on what grounds, like how do people perceive us when we say that our line is the only correct line? If that's what I was trying to ask.
Our line is the right line, did you say? Oh, sorry, go on. Sorry.
Yeah, I think like that's the big problem. I know so many people that don't feel welcome and are in our movement because they're not vegan. And like, to me, that's the point of not calling myself vegan, to say, come to our march. Not all of us are vegan. Join us, help us. We're not going to talk about food when you're there. Please come and join us, and let's pass this factory farming. Let's pass this fur thing. And yeah, maybe some very purist vegans will say, you know what, we need to kick Orlando out of the movement because of that wine that he drank twice a year, right? Then maybe some people will say that, and maybe we will lose some of the purist vegans, right? But as a result, the 95% of people who are not vegan, they're suddenly going to feel welcome to come and help because they're not going to feel judged when they come. We're not going to tell them that it's okay, but we're just going to tell them we're just not here to talk about food. We're here to change the laws for animals, and there's lots of non-vegans here, and we're just not going to talk about it. Just like, let's just not create this separation, this identity. So I'm not trying to create like a third purity identity. I'm just trying to recognize that I was already a part of that 95% of people who recognize that they're harming animals, and be like, you know what? I thought I was pure over here, and I realized I've been harming a lot of animals, even when it's not necessary to fly, even when it's just for convenience that I've flown, that I've used a car. And I think most people do it for convenience and think it's like a necessary evil. But I just don't think that, I'd rather lose a few of the purest vegans if it opens the door to all people here who love animals and are not pure enough. I think we'll get a lot more people focused on more achievable things like fur ban, as opposed to trying to pass vegan laws that are like all or nothing, and we separate ourselves from everyone else with this identity. So I'm not trying to create a new identity. I'm trying to remove this identity and tell everyone else, I'm doing my best, you're doing your best. Let's work together for animals. Let's see what we agree with, and let's work together to pass these laws.
It feels like you're advocating for system change and for political activism at the expense of personal accountability. And I think, like, although in the past you've said that, yes, both are necessary, I feel like this messaging is saying that the other one is not necessary, and actually that it's irrelevant and not, it's actually almost like, you know, like against that. Whereas the thing is, the risk of this is of saying like to someone, hey, look, it's not your fault, it's the government's fault. You're taking personal accountability from them. And then we are letting them, enabling them to do anything basically, just because they can't be 100% not harming animals because of the system. Like the mindset of I'm going to do everything I possibly can whilst changing the system, it is needed. And to have someone look at someone like you who says, look, hey, I'm gonna do something like that I don't need to do for no reason other than to convince you that I'm not vegan. Now come and join us. That for me, that is a more dangerous message than saying go vegan could ever be. And so I find some like inconsistency in this a little bit, man. I'm trying to be fair. I don't want to argue with you. Obviously, we said we didn't want to fight here, and I don't think we are doing. But I do find a big inconsistency there, and I have to, I have to say, man.
No, for sure, I get it. But to me, the inconsistency is thinking that somebody is ethical if they fly unnecessarily and avoid non-vegan wine. To me, that's the inconsistency. So I'm just pointing out, hey, this is a lot worse. And you were cool with me being vegan and saying I'm ethical when I was doing this really harmful thing. And then, yeah, I'm not saying that like we should like go out and harm animals. I'm not saying that we shouldn't try to live in line with our values. We definitely should try to live in line with our values. My issue is when we obsess with living in line with our values and we take it to such an extreme that it just becomes exclusive to everyone else. And then when we say, if you don't live in line with your values in these ways, you're not vegan, therefore not ethical. But if you are doing all these other harmful things, that's fine. So to me, that's the inconsistency that I find in veganism and that I wanted to bring down and say, look, this small thing that I'm doing is nothing compared to the harm that I was doing before and that many vegans are all continuing to cause while calling themselves pure and calling other people hypocrites. But the the difference is one causes a lot more harm than the other. But this might be like a whole other topic because the first question was like about the word, and then this conversation is like about the purity of it, like actually how much should we go out of our way to be pure.
Okay, so I'm gonna cut it short there because it sounds like it will spin off into a whole nother conversation, which it kind of already did, but that's okay. And we're gonna get into some of the questions that were actually in the chat. And this one is from Vegan Shannon, who says, Orlando, do you think it is accurate when people who have heard your ideas take them and say going vegan is not doing anything? I've heard this multiple times now, and I don't think you feel this way.
No, I don't think that's accurate. I don't think we should say doing vegan isn't doing anything. I don't think that's a good message at all because, like I said, personal transformation, trying to live more in line with our values, trying to educate ourselves about the way that we're harming and changing our behaviors, I think is really important. I think it's also very good for people as a low barrier to entry. I agree with those things. I just think the problem is obsessing with consumption to the point where you are spending all this time trying to figure out these small things and then telling people, wow, you're evil, you're a murderer, you're a hypocrite, you shouldn't march with us. I think that's the point at which I think veganism becomes counterproductive. So I think I would never say that it's not helping anything. I would never criticize any activist as saying that they're not doing anything. I just think that we shouldn't go too far with it and think that all of our energy or most of our energy should go into that as opposed to systemic change.
Okay, David, did you want to speak on that at all, or should we move on?
No, we can move on. I think if we've already gone over that, yeah.
All right, this question is, wouldn't the problematic use of the word vegan just be solved if we all collectively and individually commit to clarifying that veganism is not about diet, it's an ethical position about animals, part of which affects diet. In other words, rehabilitate the word and meaning of vegan, which is about animal rights.
David, yes, clearly that's what I think. And Orlando will say no. I think that's the shortest answer we've both got to that question. No, absolutely. I agree with that point. And you, Orlando, you can
pretty much. I agree that a lot of people think that's the way to go, and I think the word is already so bad in most people's mind that it's not worth the effort trying to educate them about what veganism mean. And look, it's not a diet. It's not a diet. I'd just rather say drop it and move on to another word that I already agree with, like they're against animal cruelty. Most people will say, yes, okay, sign this petition, donate here, call your governor, boom. So I think not spending the time trying to reclaim the word. But yeah, this is where David and I disagree. And I'm not sure how we can keep getting clear on whether it's worth to fight for it or to just let it go.
I say do everything Orlando just said and encourage them to also stop contributing themselves. I think we do everything with them. Sign this thing and go vegan. Here's what you got to. Here's how you do it. That's what I would answer. Yeah.
Okay. So the next question is from Fabian, who asks, "What are your thoughts about the survey that says that 34% of the population in the U.S. is for a ban of slaughterhouses, and the survey specifically said that it would cause no more meat?" Yeah, David?
Can I answer that? Yeah, that was on 1,000 participants. That wasn't the population of the US. And from what I've read of it, it was over the phone. So, and also it's what I mentioned earlier with Orlando, is that people say things that they think make them look good without actually considering the consequences. And I think it's 1,000 participants. It really doesn't represent the population of any country. So although it's great, I like it. Obviously, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I'm saying let's be realistic about this. Let's not go and base our decisions on a study of 1,000 people.
Orlando, any thoughts to add?
Yeah, from a demographic perspective, if you can get like, I think it's like 1,200 people and you do it in a random way, with these statistical matters, it can be representative of any country if you do the statistics right. So that's when you see most surveys, polls about presidents, whatever, you can only have like 1,100, 1,200 people, and it can be representative if you do it right. But of course, like David says, some people probably exaggerated when they said that. So I wouldn't take the numbers at face value, but it just says to me a lot more people are on board with closing factory farms, and I think we should help them realize, like strengthen that message, and then say, okay, how can we make the alternatives cheaper, tastier for you, and get them on board. Yeah, maybe it's not as high as that, as 40% as that survey said, but I think it's definitely high enough that we can start working on it, as opposed to working with the 2-3% that are vegan.
Okay.
Maybe we can take like 1 or 2 more. So
yeah, we have
I think
I ended the questions already in the chat. So this one says, "I totally agree." Oh no, that's not a question. Where is it? When were we not welcoming to people who are not vegan?
When are we not welcoming?
Yeah, that's the question.
I feel like when we ask them, how long have you been vegan? I think that's not a welcoming question, because it presumes that if you're here, you must be vegan. And if you're not, then maybe you're out of place. And then if they say, I'm not vegan, then we immediately tell them, oh, why not? Have you watched this documentary? Here's this flyer. Then when we introduce them to our friend, hey, here's my friend Cheyenne. She's not vegan yet, but she's interested. So I think just like having that identity and separating them and asking them, just assuming that they should be vegan, I think that's just not welcoming, because it creates a separation between vegans and non-vegans within the movement. And I think a lot of times we post things that are pretty abusive bullying, like being like, you're murderers, you're rapists, you're hypocrites. I think all of that is not welcoming to people who haven't made the connection yet.
David, any thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I I think that there is to be a line drawn in that. Of course, we want people to feel welcome to speak to us about these things. But at the same time, they need to be held accountable for the things that they're paying for. These people, they're not children. We're talking about adults here, and adults can handle a message, and they can handle being called a hypocrite if they're being hypocritical. I mean, I've been called a hypocrite loads of times. I've been called loads of names. It's not nice, but do I reflect on it? Yes, I reflect on it. We all reflect on things that upset us. And if something makes us feel good, we're not going to think about it twice. If something makes us feel shit, it's going to stay with us for a long time. So I think this kind of judgment, people say like, don't judge. There's only two types of people in the world. People who judge people and people who lie about judging people. Everybody judges people. This is how it is. And I think the feeling of being judged makes you change. I've been judged by people and it made me change in many ways. And I also, one more thing about, you mentioned like not judging, you mentioned about not making people feel welcome, asking how long have you been vegan? I mean, come on, if we had a movement, let's rewind a couple of 100 years and we have a movement for the suffragettes, for example, doing a march or a protest, and you ask someone, hey, how long have you been for women's rights? And they're like, oh, I'm actually not really for women's rights. So I'm actually against them, but I support maybe like one of the things you're talking about. I'm sorry, but like that person wouldn't have been welcome then, and they shouldn't be welcome now. I mean, if you want to learn and change, then come. But if you're not agreeing with us, if you don't actually want this to end, why are you here in this march? So I think there has to be some kind of, obviously we can't stop people from coming. Like I said, that's pointless. But there definitely has to be a message that says, hey, look, you should definitely change if you're going to come march with us. Like it just makes sense. And it's a better, more consistent message. So that's where I stand. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I would just say that if people say, no, I'm not down with women's rights, no, I'm not down with animal rights, then they have nothing to do there. Totally agree. I just think that's not equivalent of being vegan. I think the equivalency would be, yes, how long ago did you stop buying products from sexist companies?
Yeah.
How long ago did you start boycotting Harvey Weinstein movies, right? Like that's the point where I don't think it's equivalent. People can say, yes, I'm down, and I'm still contributing in these ways. So that's why I think it's not equivalent, and that we should welcome people.
Okay, so this is the last question from the comments, from the chat, and this one is from Douglas saying, if watching Game of Thrones is vegan, what does a vegan world look like, David, to you? Do we have to keep moving the definition to fix the next thing?
Yeah, if watching Game of Thrones, I mean, there's an easy way around that. Watch it illegally. I mean, if you don't want to because they've got so much fur and horses and all that, and it was honestly, it's horrible to watch it. It is horrible. And if I knew I was giving them any money, I wouldn't have watched it. I wait until it comes out. Just the same as like, there have been movies where I have known that animals were exploited in those movies, and I've chosen not to watch them for that reason. And if I've ever, sometimes you can't find out. I think it's important to maybe you try and find out, like, okay, if animals been used in this movie, what's the situation before you go and give them money? I don't think that is necessarily it's not a negative thing. It's a good thing. I think there is no end to how far we can go with this, and I think we should always try to learn. There's no use just saying, okay, we could never do anything about it, so let's stop learning. Aren't we supposed to be constantly learning? Is this not what this is all about? So I see no problem with constantly learning about these things and trying to adapt and change as you find more things out, like Game of Thrones.
Well, then I would just say, if watching something illegally, not contributed to it monetarily, makes it allows us to keep being vegan, then watching videos of the circus online illegally, and let's say somebody enjoys that, then would that also be vegan? Because you're not contributing money, you're just watching animals perform for you because you enjoy it. Like in Game of Thrones, would that also be vegan then, to watch and enjoy videos of the circus online? And if not, then how is that different from Game of Thrones?
It would be a bit weird, I would say. I mean, but it's the same as like you open Instagram or you open TikTok and there's someone doing something with an animal there, or like, I don't know, where's the line drawn? You know, when it becomes, where does it go from exploitation to somebody just having fun with their pets? You know, with the circus, it's pretty clear that that's animal exploitation. If somebody's entertained by that, but they want to watch it, that's, I guess, so be it, right? They're not perpetuating it. If they're promoting it, there's a problem, because then they're telling other people, hey, you should watch this. It's the same as, like, I suppose if it's like if a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, does it make a sound? If somebody eats meat, doesn't pay for it, doesn't tell anybody, is it not vegan?
They're still vegan.
You know,
they're still
we
vegan.
don't know, do we? So how could we ever know they weren't, if you know what I mean? Technically no, but like, if they didn't tell anybody, they didn't promote it, and they kept it to themselves and they didn't pay for it, as far as we all know, they're still vegan. We don't know. The problem is the perpetuation of the idea that this is okay. If someone watches a circus video, doesn't pay for it, watches it, tells everybody they watched it, then they're perpetuating animal exploitation. They're telling people this is entertainment, right? If they watch it alone in their house and no one ever knows, I mean, what are you going to do? I don't know, man. So be it. Like, I don't know. They're not doing anything. They've not contributed in any way. They're doing it for their selfish. It is what it is. Like, we never know anyway. So again, it's a null argument. There's no point even discussing it. We don't know. The problem is promoting it. The problem is paying for it. That's what's causing the, in my logic anyway. My logic might be faulty there. I don't know. I'm sure somebody will tell me if it is.
Okay, so that was the end of our questions, and there's still more streaming in. There's just like people have so many questions, but this has been recorded, like I mentioned previously. So if you want to watch this back in the future, or if you want to share this one with anybody, then it will be made available probably through YouTube, and will be posted on the event page for the future. And thank you so much to David and Orlando for having this conversation. We've been on here for hours now, and you guys have been just chatting away. I know you guys are probably really tired, so thank you so much for
1 a.m. here.
Oh,
wow.
Well, we know David
Cheyenne,
not the issue.
Cheyenne, are the comments recorded too? In the
Comments
recording?
are not recorded. I don't think so.
Do you think maybe somebody could copy them? Just because I haven't been able to keep up with them, and I'm interested in reading them. So if somebody could copy them all, that would be really great. Please.
Definitely do that.
And thank you so much, David, for taking the time and staying up so late. I really, really admire all the work that you do, and I feel excited that we were able to have this conversation without personal attacks or division. And I hope we can keep finding ways of working together and making our message better. So I'm really thankful for you coming on here and spending this long time debating this.
And you, man, for sure. Like, it has been a debate, but it hasn't been like a vegan gains kind of debate, which is, we both wanted to totally avoid that. And I think we succeeded. I think the comment section got a little bit like that, but we both ignored it and we kept to what we said we were going to do, which is I'm really happy about. And I hope everybody's also can take note of this. This is how people should disagree, exactly as we have done. Like, this is how a disagreement should be, because there's no hate. We're both going to keep doing what we're doing. We're both going to keep working, probably together. I'll work with DxE again for sure. Like, it's going to happen at some point. And thanks for everything you're doing. I've seen a bit of the other stuff you've been up to, and it looks awesome. So please never stop doing that, man. And everybody else in here as well. I think I know some of you, but I don't know a lot of you, but I assume that you're all here to do some good stuff. So please keep doing it. And one more thing to mention just before we go, to plug, if any of you don't already know me or didn't know me before, please do come and check, get in contact with me. Like, check out my Instagram, YouTube, etc. It's Skinny Vegan Fitness. Not because I'm a health guy, but because I'm a skinny vegan and I started doing fitness. I wasn't an activist at first, so I kept the name. So that's pretty much how it went. So do come and check that out. And Orlando, do you want to plug?
Yeah, mine is Orlando for Freedom. You can definitely follow me on Instagram again. And I think it's really important to keep having conversations and disagreements and not getting into arguments. Hopefully people can keep plugging away at difficult conversations without having Facebook debates. And I just encourage everyone, when you have a disagreement with someone, just tell them, let's not debate on Facebook here. Let's just jump on a call. And I think that'll be much more helpful. So thanks everyone for attending. Thanks David and Cheyenne for moderating and reading with all those questions. And yeah, thanks everyone. Have a good night.
Quick question. If anybody knows how to save the chat.
Yeah, you click the 3 dots on the bottom of the chat next to everyone, and where you're able to type, there's a little box with 3 dots, and then it comes up. And then when it's save chat, you click show in folder. And then also, I just want to say, I do think it's important to challenge people online because other people are hearing the message and sometimes need to see it challenged.
For sure.
Yeah. You could definitely say something like, hey, I disagree with your points because 1, 2, 3, but I don't want to debate here on Facebook. Let's have a call instead, something like that. But yeah, I think we definitely should do that. But Cheyenne, do you have the comments saved now?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, I guess we'll end it here. Thank you so much.
Thanks everyone. Bye.
Thanks. Bye. Bye-bye.